Hey guys. Tonight we are traveling back in time and space. We're heading to the 18th century Orkney Islands, a scattered archipelago of some 70 islands floating off the northernmost tip of Scotland. Think of it less as a historical documentary and more as a mental time machine. So pack a very thick wool coat, a sturdy pair of boots, and maybe leave your modern sense of justice behind. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive the first day on the diet alone, which was mostly oats and fish. But we'll get to that. This is a story about survival, shame, and a bizarre loophole in the law that turns sin into a strategy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how this little community of ours spans the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is not the sight, but the feeling. There's a deep, damp cold that seems to rise from the very soil, carried on a wind that never, ever stops. It's not a dramatic, biting blizzard kind of cold. It's something more persistent, more intimate. It seeps through the seams of your clothes, chills the surface of your skin, and makes a home deep in your bones. You just stepped off a small, rocking boat onto a crude stone pier, and the land itself feels unwelcoming. You lift your head and look around. The second thing you notice is the distinct lack of, anything tall. There are no trees, not a single one. Just low, undulating hills of green and muted brown, covered in a tough, springy carpet of heather and grass that shivers constantly in the wind. The landscape feels naked, exposed under an immense and dramatic sky. It's a canvas of 1,000 shades of grey, shifting and churning with clouds that race in from the Atlantic. The world here is defined by three things: the land, the sea, and the sky. The land is poor, rocky, unstingy. The sea is a constant, churning presence, a source of food, a highway to the outside world, and a graveyard for the unlucky. Its roar is the baseline of existence here, a rhythmic, percussive pounding against black, jagged cliffs that fringe the island. The sound is hypnotic, the crush, the roar, and then the long, drawn-out sigh as water drags millions of pebbles back down the shore. Above it all, the sky is king. It dictates the light, the weather, and the mood of the entire world. You follow a muddy track away from the pier, your feet sinking slightly with each step. Ahead, you see the settlement. It's not a village. Not really. It's a small, grim cluster of low slung stone houses. They look less like they were built and more like they grew out of the earth itself, hunkered down to brace against the gales. Their walls are thick, made of rough, grey flagstones, and their roofs are made of the same stone, or perhaps thatch held down by ropes and heavy rocks. A thin, almost ethereal plume of blue-grey smoke drifts sideways from a hole in one of the roofs. It carries a scent you've never smelled before, earthy, a little bit sweet, a little bit acrid. It's the smell of burning peat, the only fuel available in this treeless land. This, you'll come to learn, is the constant, ambient perfume of life itself. As you get closer, you see people. A woman in a heavy, dark wool skirt and a simple linen cap is bent over, digging in a small patch of garden, her movements slow and methodical. A couple of men, their faces weathered into deep lines like cracked leather, are mending a net by the shore. They don't look up as you approach, or rather, they do, but it's a quick, dismissive glance. Their eyes are not hostile, just pragmatic. They are the eyes of people who have no time for strangers, whose entire existence is a negotiation with scarcity. You are a variable they haven't accounted for, and it makes them worry. This is the world of the 18th century crofter. Life here wasn't part of the grand, romanticized Scottish history of clan battles and noble heroes you might have read about. It was a life of subsistence agriculture on a tiny plot of rented land that crofted fishing in some of the most treacherous waters in the world. Historians often point out that while the Industrial Revolution was beginning to stir in cities like Glasgow and Edinburgh, places like Orkney were a world apart, almost a different country. But it's a mistake to think of it as just a forgotten corner of Scotland. There's a deeper history here. The names of the places Kirkwall, Stromness, a dozen tiny farms ending in Beatister or Garth, they don't sound Gaelic. They're Norse. For centuries, these islands were a Viking stronghold, a vital part of a Scandinavian sea kingdom. And though it's been a few hundred years since they were formally handed over to Scotland, that Viking DNA lingers. It's in the dialect, in the folklore, in a certain stoic resilience you see in the people's faces. It's a fascinating and often overlooked cultural fusion. Historians and archaeologists, in fact, still debate just how isolated Orkney truly was during this period, from where you're standing. Buffeted by the wind and dyed with suspicion. It feels like the absolute edge of the known world. Yet, merchant ships did call in at the main towns of Kirkwall and Stromness, bringing salt, iron tools, timber, and news from the south. The real question, the one that's almost impossible to answer, is how much of that outside world ever trickled down to a person like you. In a tiny, windswept settlement like this, standing here, it feels like the answer is very, very little. Your world is this patch of rock, this community, this unending wind, and there is absolutely nowhere to hide. As you acclimate to the biting wind and the stark landscape, you start to notice the invisible architecture of this place. It's not made of stone or peat, but of belief and fear. In a world defined by low, horizontal lines, the sea, the horizon, the squat houses one building dares to be vertical, the church. It stands on a side rise, not grand or ornate like a cathedral, but solid, severe, and imposing. It's built from the same grey stone as everything else, but its walls are taller, its roof steeper. It has a small, simple belfry pointing a stony finger at the perpetually churning sky. The building doesn't offer comfort or beauty, it offers authority. It's a declaration. While the houses are huddled against the wind, the church seems to challenge it. It is the physical anchor of the most powerful force on these islands, the kirk. The kirk is the Church of Scotland, a brand of Protestantism forged in the fire and brimstone of the Reformation. It is Presbyterian, which means it's governed not by bishops in some distant city, but by committees of elders right here, in your community, and in 18th century Orkney. The kirk isn't just a place you go on Sundays. It is the community's operating system. It dictates the rhythm of the week, the rules of social engagement, and the very definition of right and wrong. Its local power is wielded by a body called the Kirk Session. Imagine a combination of a town council, a courtroom, and a neighborhood watch, all presided over by the parish minister. The minister is the most important man you will ever know. He is likely the only person in the community with a formal education. He lives in the mountains, a stone house noticeably larger and better maintained than any other. He is your spiritual guide, your teacher, your moral arbiter, and, if necessary, your accuser. You see him on Sunday, a severe figure in black, standing in the pulpit of the cold, unadorned church. There are no statues, no stained glass, no incense. There is only the word of God, delivered in a booming voice that echoes off the stone walls for hours. His sermons are not gentle parables of love and forgiveness. They are thunderous condemnations of sin, detailed explorations of damnation, and stern reminders of the constant, watchful eye of a righteous, and often wrathful, God. But the minister doesn't work alone. He has his elders. These are men from the congregation, farmers, merchants, perhaps a blacksmith. They are your neighbors, the man who helps you bring in the harvest, the father of the girl you grew up with. And their job, their solemn duty, is to police the morals of the parish. They are the eyes and ears of the Kirk Session. They are watching, Always. This power touches every part of your life. Take Sunday. The Sabbath. It is a day of absolute, enforced stillness. All work ceases. You cannot mend a fence, sharpen a tool, or even do the week's washing. To do so is a sin, punishable by the Kirk session. The only acceptable activities are prayer, scripture reading, and quiet contemplation. Even walking too briskly or whistling a tune could be seen as a sign of a frivolous, ungodly spirit. Here's a little detail that shows just how seriously they took this in many Scottish parishes at the time. The Kirk session appointed men to be Caesars. Their job was to patrol the village during the Sunday service and literally seize anyone found loitering outside or, God forbid, working. They would be dragged before the elders the following week to answer for their crime. This wasn't just about encouraging church attendance, it was about imposing total conformity. Historians have long debated the true nature of the Kirk's power during this era. Was this system, as its defenders would claim, a genuine and deeply felt attempt to create a moral, godly society in a harsh and unforgiving world, a way to provide structure and a shared sense of purpose to a poor and isolated populace, or was it, as critics argue, a sophisticated mechanism of social control lay way for the island's elite, the minister, the laird, the landowner, to whom everyone owed rent and loyalty, to maintain an iron grip on the crofters by controlling morality, by defining sin and doling out punishment. They could quash any hint of rebellion or dissent. The fear of God became a potent tool for ensuring obedience to men. The debate really boils down to whether the Kirk was primarily an institution of faith or an institution of power. From your perspective, standing in the muddy lane and feeling the weight of your neighbor's gazes, the distinction is purely academic. You feel the control in your bones, as surely as you feel the cold. Blasphemy, disputes between neighbors, and failure to observe the Sabbath. But there is one category of sin that they pursue with relentless, almost obsessive, energy. It's a sin that cannot be hidden, a sin that leaves behind living, breathing evidence of its commission, the sin of fornication. And it is the Kirk's peculiar, bureaucratic response to this one sin that will shape your entire world. The sun, a pale, watery disk, hangs low in the sky, ushering little warmth. Your day began hours ago, long before it rose. The first sensation was not the light, but the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. It's a familiar feeling, a dull, persistent ache that is the constant companion of your life. You live in a small, one-room house, a black house, they call it, though its walls are grey stone. The name comes from the smoke. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof above a central hearth. Over the years, the constant peat smoke has coated the interior stone walls and the underside of the thatched roof with a layer of thick, black soot. The air inside is always hazy, catching the thin shafts of light from the single, small window, making them look solid. It smells of damp earth, smoke, and the close proximity of sleeping bodies. You share this space with your family, your parents, your younger siblings. At night, you all sleep on heather mattresses on the floor, huddled together for warmth. Sometimes, during the coldest parts of the winter, the family's single cow is brought inside to share the space. Its body heat, a precious resource that no one would dream of wasting. The line between human and animal, between home and barn, is blurry at best. This is a cold, hard fact of life, not a point of shame. You push aside the heavy wool blanket and your feet touch the cold, packed earth floor. The first task is always the same: stoking the embers of the peat fire. Peat burns slowly, with a low heat, and keeping the fire going is a crucial art. Once it's glowing again, you hang a heavy iron pot over it, filled with water you hauled from the well yesterday. Into the pot goes a handful of oatmeal. This will be breakfast. It's called porridge. It will also be lunch, and often it will be dinner, perhaps with a piece of dried fish or a boiled turnip if you're lucky. This is the core of your diet: oatmeal, and whatever the sea provides. Salted herring, dried cod known as stockfish that's so hard you have to hammer it before cooking. In the summer, There might be eggs from the few chickens that scratch around outside, and whatever you can grow in your small kale yard, or vegetable patch kale, neeps turnips, and twice potatoes. A relatively new crop that is slowly changing lives here. But variety is a luxury you cannot afford. Most days, it is just the oats. Your hands tell the story of your life. They are not the soft, delicate hands of a lady. They are red, choked, and strong. The skin is rough, with calluses on the palms and dirt permanently etched into the lines around your knuckles. You look at them. These hands have hauled buckets of water from the well. They have dug peat from the bog. A back-breaking task that involves slicing out heavy, wet bricks of earth and stacking them to dry in the wind. They have gutted countless fish. The slick feel of scales and guts and memory embedded in your skin. They have milked a cow, spun wool into yarn, and knitted the rough, oily sweaters that keep the men from freezing at sea. They have spent hours bent over in the kale yard, pulling weeds and digging potatoes from the thin, rocky soil. There is no concept of a day off. There is only the endless cycle of tasks that must be done for the family to survive. The work is divided by gender, but not by effort. The men face the terrifying dangers of the sea in their small open boats. The yoels, fishing for codling. They plough the fields with the single, heavy ox. But your work, as a woman, never ends. It is a constant, repetitive loop of domestic toil from dawn until dusk. Cooking, cleaning, mending, spinning, knitting, washing clothes in a freezing stream, tending the fire, looking after the children. One of the more peculiar, and frankly unpleasant, details of daily life is the manuring of the fields. With so little animal dung available, every source of fertilizer was precious. This included human waste, which was collected in a pit, mixed with turf ash and other organic matter, and then spread on the fields. Historians refer to this as the midden, a compost heap of immense importance. The job of carrying the baskets of this ripe mixture to the fields often fell to the women. It was just another part of the endless, unglamorous work of survival. This life of grinding poverty and relentless labor is the cage you were born into. You have few options. Service in a wealthier house, like the minister's manse or the laird's hall, is one possibility. It would mean a roof over your head and regular meals, but it also means long hours, no pay, and being subject to the whims of your master. Marriage is the other path, the expected path, but even that offers no guarantee of a better life. It likely means trading your father's crowded black house for your husband's, and starting the cycle of childbirth and domestic drudgery all over again. Historians continue to debate the emotional and psychological landscape of people in your position. Did this constant struggle for survival leave any room for joy, for dreams, for love? Some argue that the concepts of romantic love and individual fulfillment were luxuries that simply didn't exist for the 18th century Orcadian crofter. Life was about duty, family, and survival. Others argue that this is a patronizing view, and that human emotions are universal. That even in the harshest of circumstances, people still found moments of laughter, affection, and hope. Standing at the door of your smoky house, looking out at the grey sea, you feel the weight of it all. The hunger in your belly, the ache in your back, the calluses on your hands. You are young, and your body is strong, but you can see your future mapped out in the tired face of your mother. It's a future of more work, more hunger, and more cold, and you can't help but wonder if there is any way out. Your world is a patchwork of tiny farms, each one clinging to a piece of land rented from someone you will likely never meet. But you know his name. He is the laird, the landowner. His existence is a distant but heavy presence, like a mountain on the horizon that dictates the weather for the entire valley. The laird might be a Scottish nobleman, or perhaps an Orcadian merchant who grew rich from trade and bought up vast tracts of land. He might live in a grand house in Kirkwall, or even further away, in Edinburgh or London. It doesn't matter. His power is absolute, exercised through his representative on the island, a man called the factor or the chamberlain. The factor is the one you deal with. He is the one who collects the rent. The rent is the central, terrifying fact of your family's economic life. It's not just paid in money, which is a scarce commodity here. It's paid in coin. A portion of your grain harvest, a number of dried fish, a specific quantity of butter or cheese, a certain number of days of unpaid labor. This is called corvée labor, working on the laird's own farm, or repairing his roads, or building his walls. The list of obligations is long and complex, a web of duties that keeps your family in a state of permanent dependency. You see the stark difference in worlds when you walk past the laird's estate, or perhaps the home of the taxman. A major tenant who leases a large area from the laird and then sublets it to smaller crofters like your family. His house is made of stone, but the stones are cotton-fitted, not just piled up. It has multiple rooms and glazed glass windows. A luxury that seems almost magical. It has a proper chimney, so the smoke goes up and away, not into the house. It's surrounded by the best land, the most fertile fields, sheltered from the worst of the wind. Inside that house is a life you can barely imagine. People eat from ceramic plates, not wooden bowls. They have separate rooms for sleeping and eating. The women of the house do not dig peat or gut fish. They might oversee the servants, or do fine embroidery. Their hands are soft. You watch as the taxman or the factor rides past on a horse. A horse. Your family has an ox. If you're lucky, a horse is a symbol of speed, of power, of a life not bound to the slow, plodding rhythm of walking. He wears clothes made of fine wool, not the rough, homespun stuff you wear. He has leather boots that come up to his knee. He is, in every conceivable way, a different class of being. The relationship between the lairdess and their tenants has been a subject of intense historical debate for centuries. The popular narrative, especially fueled by the later Highland clearances, was one of pure, mustache-twirling villainy, greedy landlords mercilessly exploiting a helpless peasantry. This is the bad laird trope, and, without a doubt, there were many who fit this description, raising rents to unsustainable levels and evicting families who couldn't pay, leaving them destitute. However, more recent scholarship has painted a more nuanced picture. Some historians argue that the relationship was often one of paternalism. The laird had a traditional, customary obligation to his tenants. He was expected to provide support during times of famine, to help families rebuild after a storm, and to act as a judge in local disputes. In this view, the rent was not just payment for land, but part of a complex social contract, a system of mutual, albeit unequal, obligations. The question historians still grapple with is how often this ideal of a good laird was actually practiced. Was it a genuine social system, or just a pretty story the wealthy told themselves to justify their power? For you, on the ground, the reality is much simpler. The factor is a man to be feared. When he comes to collect the rent, it is a time of great anxiety. Your father stands before him, hat in hand, his demeanor respectful, almost subservient. You and the rest of the family stay inside, quiet, hoping. Did the harvest yield enough? Was the fishing good enough? Will we have enough left to feed ourselves through the long, dark winter? One of the strangest and most frustrating aspects of this system was something called furlage. This was an old feudal law that required all tenants of an estate to have their grain ground at the laird's mill, for a fee. You couldn't just grind it yourself at home with a hand quern, even if your crop was poor. You had to give a portion of it, often a significant portion, like 1/13 of your grain, to the miller, who in turn paid the laird for the monopoly. It was a classic example of a system designed not for efficiency, but for extraction. You were tied, or thirlead, to that mill, another invisible chain binding you to the laird. This rigid social hierarchy, the distant laird at the top, his factor below him, then the taxman, and finally, at the very bottom, the mass of crofters like your family, is as solid and unchangeable as the landscape itself. You are born into your station. The idea of moving up in the world is not just unlikely, it is almost unthinkable. The gap between your smoky black house and the factor's clean, warm home is too vast to cross. But while the wall between the rich and the poor is high, it is not entirely impregnable. There are cracks. There are moments of interaction. The wealthy men of the parish, the lairde's son, the tacksman, the visiting merchant are not abstract figures. They are real people. You see them at church, at the market, on the road, and they, in turn, see you, and in that seeing, in those brief moments of contact between two vastly different worlds, lies a strange and dangerous possibility. The wind, as always, is talking. It whispers around the corners of your stone house, whistles through the cracks in the walls, and hums a low, mournful tune across the open moorland. But today, you notice another kind of whispering. It's human. It follows you as you walk to the well, a little quieter than the wind, but just as persistent. It's the sound of women, gathered in a small group, their hands close together. They're ostensibly mending a net or sorting potatoes, but their hands are slow, their attention elsewhere. As you approach, they fall silent, their eyes follow you, and you feel the weight of their unspoken words. You know what they're talking about. They're talking about Elspeth. Elspeth is a girl from a nearby croft, a little older than you. You haven't seen her for a few weeks. Not at the well, not in the kale yard, not walking the shore. Her family has been keeping her inside, but in a community this small, a secret is like water in a sieve. It can't be held for long. Everyone knows Elspeth is pregnant, and she is not married. The whispers are a mixture of things. There's pity, of course. They quiet, head-shaking sympathy for the trouble she's in, for the shame that awaits her. There's also a delicious thrill of scandal, in a life of monotonous, that breaking routine. A good piece of gossip is a rare and potent form of entertainment. It breaks the grey texture of the day. But there's something else in the whispers, too, something you can't put your finger on. A note of calculation, a flicker of something that isn't just moral judgment. When the women murmur the name of the man Elspeth has accused the taxman's eldest son, their tone changes. It becomes less about Elspeth's sin and more about the taxman's predicament. It's a subtle shift from a moral drama to an economic one. You start to listen more closely to these conversations. You learn to linger just out of sight, to seem busy with your own tasks while your ears are tuned to the frequency of gossip. The talk is full of euphemisms. A girl who is pregnant is in trouble, or she's had a mishap, or she's fallen. The act itself is folly or a stumble. The language is designed to soften the harsh reality, but everyone understands the underlying meaning. Through this network of whispers, you begin to piece together the unwritten rules of this world. You learn about other girls. From years past, there was Isobel, who named a sailor from a visiting whaling ship. He was long gone by the time her trouble became known, and she and her child were left to depend on the charity of the parish, a life of profound poverty and disgrace. A cautionary tale. Then there was Jim, who named a farmhand from her own croft. He was a poor boy with nothing to his name. The Kirk session made them marry, forcing them to start a family with no land and no resources. A union born of shame, not affection, destined for a life of even deeper hardship than their parents. Another cautionary tale. But then, you hear the story of Marian. This story is told in lower, more conspiratorial tones. Marian was a servant at the laird's house a few years back. She, too, found herself in trouble, and she named the laird's brother, a man of wealth and standing who was visiting from Edinburgh. There was a great scandal. The man, of course, denied it, but Marian was steadfast. And after weeks of pressure from the Kirk, and the threat of public scandal reaching his important friends in the city, a settlement was reached. A sum of money was paid, not to Marian directly, but to the Kirk session, to be administered for the upkeep of the child. Marian endured the public shaming, but her child did not starve. She lives now in a small cottage on the edge of the parish, and while she is still an outcast, she is not destitute. The whispers say she has a pig, and her son wears sturdy shoes. This is a different kind of story, not a cautionary tale, but a tale of possibility. It's a story that sticks in your mind. One of the fascinating tidbits of social history is the role of gossip in pre-literate or semi-literate societies. Without newspapers or widespread literacy, gossip and rumor were the primary ways information was transmitted. It wasn't just idle chatter, it was a vital social mechanism. It reinforced community norms, punished deviance through reputational damage, and served as an informal news network. Historians who study court records from this period often find that the official testimonies are just the tip of the iceberg. The real story, the context and the motives, circulated for weeks or months beforehand in the form of gossip. So when you listen to the women whispering by the well, you are not just eavesdropping. You are accessing the most important and reliable source of information available to you. You are learning the complex calculus of sin, shame, and survival. There is a historical debate on whether these situations were always predatory on the part of the men. The traditional view holds that these were overwhelmingly cases of powerful men exploiting vulnerable women, and in many, probably most, cases, this was true. However, some social historians, looking at diaries and court records, suggest a more complicated picture. They argue that premarital relationships were sometimes consensual, part of courtship rituals that went too far. The promise of marriage was a common currency in these relationships. The real crisis came not from the act itself, but from the pregnancy, and the man's subsequent refusal to marry the girl, breaking his promise. The line between seduction, consensual romance, and exploitation could be incredibly blurry. But as you stand there, feeling the cold seep into your bones, these academic distinctions mean little. What you are learning, from the whispers on the wind, is that there are rules to this game. You learn that accusing a man with no money is a disaster. You learn that accusing a transient sailor is pointless. But you also learn that accusing a man with money, a man with a reputation to protect, a man tied to the community, that can lead to a different outcome. It's a terrifying, shameful, dangerous outcome, but it is different. And for the first time, a desperate, unthinkable thought begins to form in the back of your mind. It's not a plan, not yet. It's just the shadow of an idea, born from the whispers on the wind. Sunday morning arrives, not with a gentle sense of peace, but with a heavy, palpable tension. The wind has died down, and the silence that remains feels unnaturally loud. Today is the day of Elspeth's public shaming. The whispers of the past few weeks are about to become a formal, public spectacle. Your family walks to the church together. The mood is somber. No one speaks of what is to come, but everyone knows. You see other families making the same journey, their faces grim and determined. This is not just a religious duty today, it's a community obligation. To be absent would be to make a statement, to draw unwanted attention from the kirk session. Everyone must be there to witness. You file into the cold, stone church. The air is damp and smells of wet wool and peat smoke. The wooden pews are hardened and forgiving. You find your family as usual spot and sit, your hands folded in your lap. The minister climbs the steep steps to the pulpit. His black robes a stark contrast to the grey walls. He looks out over his congregation, his gaze sweeping across every face, a shepherd counting his flock and checking for wolves. The service begins as it always does, a psalm, a long prayer, a reading from the scripture. The minister's voice fills the church, a low, rumbling drone that you've heard your whole life. But today, his words seem to have an extra edge, a sharper focus. He speaks of wickedness, of the snares of the flesh, of the stain of sin that can corrupt a soul and a community. He isn't speaking in generalities, he is setting the stage. Then, the moment arrives. After the sermon, the minister pauses. The silence in the church is absolute. Even the shuffling of feet and the occasional cough cease. He looks down from the pulpit, not at the congregation as a whole, but at a specific object near the front. It's a stool, a simple, three-legged wooden stool, placed in a prominent position on a small platform, directly in front of the pulpit. It is in full view of every single person in the church. It is unadorned, rough-hewn, and menacing in its simplicity. This is the stool of repentance, also known as the cutty stool. It is an object of profound and utter humiliation. The minister calls Elspeth's name. The side door of the church opens, and she is led in by one of the church elders. All eyes turn. You see her, and a gasp catches in your throat. She is dressed in sackcloth, a coarse, rough, shapeless garment of the cheapest material, a visual symbol of her penitent state. Her head is bowed, her hair unkempt. Her pregnancy is now obvious, her belly swelling beneath the rough fabric. She doesn't look at anyone. Her eyes are fixed on the floor as the elder guides her to the stool. She sits, and now the ritual begins. The minister directs his attention to her, his voice shifting from the preacher's boom to the prosecutor's sharp inquiry. He recounts her sin in blunt, unforgiving language. He speaks of the shame she has brought upon herself, her family, and the entire parish. He demands her public confession. Her voice, when it comes, is barely a whisper. "I confess my sin of fornication," she says, the words seemingly ripped from her throat. "And who is the father of this child of shame?" the minister thunders. She whispers the name the taxman's son. A low murmur ripples through the congregation. From your pew, you can see the taxman and his family. Their faces are like stone, their eyes fixed forward, betraying nothing. This is not a one-time event. Elspeth will have to sit on this stool, in this same spot, for 3 consecutive Sundays. Each week, she will be subjected to the minister's harangue and the silent, burning gaze of the entire community. Only after this ritual of public penance is complete will she be considered to have paid her debt to the church and be readmitted to the congregation. This practice of public shaming was a cornerstone of the Kirk's power. It was a form of psychological warfare. Historians argue about its effectiveness. Did it truly deter others from sinning, or did it just teach them to be more careful, more secretive? A little-known and rather bizarre variation of this punishment in some parishes involved the jougs. This was an iron collar, attached by a chain to the wall of the church or a post in the churchyard. A person found guilty of a serious offense, like blasphemy or adultery, would be locked into the jougs by their neck for hours, sometimes all day, exposed to the elements and the ridicule of anyone who passed by. It was a punishment straight out of the medieval period, surviving well into the 18th century. The stool of repentance was a step up from that. But the core principle was the same: shame as a tool of control. There is a long-standing debate among historians about the emotional experience of the person on the stool. Was it pure, unadulterated agony, a complete social death, or was there a strange, ritualistic element of acceptance in it? By submitting to the shaming, by performing the role of the penitent sinner, a person was following a clear, if brutal, path back into the community. It was a horrific ordeal, but it was a structured one. The alternative, being cast out completely with no path back, was arguably even more terrifying. The question is whether this ritual offered a genuine chance at redemption, or if it simply branded a person, particularly a woman, with a permanent mark of disgrace. You watch Elspeth, a small, lonely figure huddled on the stool, absorbing the collective judgment of her world. You feel a wave of sickness and pity. It is a horrifying, cruel spectacle. You want to look away, but you can't. No one can. You are all participants in this ritual. But, as you watch, another, colder thought intrudes, pushing aside the pity. You look from Elspeth in her sackcloth, to the taxman's family sitting rigid in their pew, and you realize what this is. This is not just about a girl's sin. This is a confrontation. This public agony is the first move in a very serious game. Elspeth is paying an immense price, but in doing so, She has just put the taxman's son and his entire family's reputation on the line. And now, everyone in this church is waiting to see what the next move will be. The image of Elspeth on the stool of repentance is burned into your mind. You see it when you close your eyes at night. You see it in the flickering flames of the peat fire. The raw, calculated cruelty of the ritual haunts you. Your first reaction is fear. A deep, primal fear of ever finding yourself in her position, of being the object of that cold, collective stare. But as the days pass, the fear begins to curdle into something else, something more complex. You start to think past the shame. You start to think about the why. Why that specific ritual, why the public declaration, why force her to name the man slowly. You begin to understand that the shame is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a process. A very strained, very formal process. You're in the kale yard, pulling weeds, your hands deep in the cold, damp earth. Your mind is working, turning over the whispers you've heard, the scene you witnessed in the church. You try to piece it together like a puzzle. Piece one: a girl like you, a crofter's daughter, has nothing. No money, no land, no legal power. Your body and your reputation are your only assets, and they are fragile. Piece two: a man of a higher class, a taxman's son, a merchant. The lairdess nephew has everything you don't. Money, land, influence. But he also has something to lose: his good name, his standing in the community and in the eyes of the kirk. Piece three: the kirk. It is obsessed with punishing the sin of fornication. It has a formal system for doing so. A system that demands a confession, a penance, and crucially, the naming of the father. Piece for the child. The inescapable, living proof of the sin. A child needs to be fed, clothed, and housed. This is not just a moral problem for the kirk, it's a practical one. An abandoned child becomes a burden on the parish, paid for out of the poor box, a fund collected from the congregation. The kirk, and the landowners who were the main contributors to this fund, have a very strong financial incentive to make sure the child is supported by its parents. You stand up, wiping the dirt from your hands onto your apron, and look out towards the sea. The pieces are clicking into place. The public shaming, as horrific as it is, serves a critical legal and financial function by forcing the woman to name the father in front of the entire community. The kirk officially links him to the sin. It creates a public record. It makes his denial harder. It turns a private mishap into a public liability. This is the moment of revelation. This isn't just a system of moral punishment. It's a system of accountability. And in a society where you have no other way to hold a powerful man accountable, this brutal, humiliating ritual is the only tool at your disposal. A shocking, audacious thought begins to take root in your mind. What if the shame is not a deterrent, but a price? What if you looked at the stool repentance not as the end of your life, but as a necessary, terrible investment to secure a future? You start to do the math. A desperate, grim kind of accounting. On one side of the ledger, 3 Sundays of unimaginable public humiliation, a lifetime of being known as a fallen woman, the whispers, the stares, the social isolation, the loss of any chance at a respectable marriage. On the other side of the ledger, a small, but regular, sum of money, ad income, not a lot, but enough to rent a tiny cottage of your own, enough to buy oatmeal and milk, enough to ensure that your child doesn't starve, enough to survive without being dependent on your parents or the parish poo box. It's a monstrous calculation, to consciously choose to endure the worst thing you can imagine in exchange for the most basic of needs, food and shelter. It's a plan that requires you to weaponize your own body, to leverage the kirk's rigid morality, and to gamble everything on the outcome. The very idea feels like a sin in itself. It's cold. It's calculating. It's the opposite of everything a young woman is supposed to be: pious, chaste, and submissive. It feels like a betrayal of your family, your faith, and your own sense of self. Historians who study this phenomenon read a very careful line. They call it a strategy or a mechanism, but they are cautious about ascribing modern motivations to historical actors. The idea of a young woman in the 18th century making such a cold, rational, economic decision is controversial. Did women really think in these terms, or were they simply desperate victims of circumstance? And the financial outcome was an unintended, though sometimes welcome, consequence of. Therefore the debate centers on the question of female agency. Was this a choice, however constrained and terrible? Or was it simply something that happened to them? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, a complex mix of passion, desperation, and, in some cases, a sliver of calculated hope. One obscure but fascinating detail from Kirk session records is the occasional appearance of women who were repeat offenders. A woman might appear before the elders, pregnant out of wedlock, not just once, but 2 or 3 times in her life, each time with a different, and notably, a property man. While it's impossible to know her exact motives, this pattern suggests that for some, this was just a one-time disaster. It had become a viable, if precarious, way of life. You shut the thought down, deep inside you. It's too ugly, too dangerous. You go back to your work, pulling the weights with a renewed, almost violent, energy. But the idea is there now. It has been planted, the knowledge that the Kirk system of punishment, designed to control and shame you, could, with immense risk and unimaginable sacrifice, be turned into a tool for your own survival. The most sinful act imaginable could become a financial plan, and that, you realize, is the most terrifying thought of all. You've given the beast a name now, in the privacy of your own thoughts. You call it the plan, but out in the world, in the hushed conversations of the parish, this strange economic arrangement has its own, more formal-sounding title. The Kirk session, and the landowners who have to pay it, refer to it as the maintenance. But the common folk, in their dark, cynical humor, have another name for it. They call it the fornication pension. It's a shocking, jarring phrase. Fornication, the gravest of sins in the Kirk's playbook. Pension, a word associated with a steady, respectable income, something a soldier or a guildsman might receive after a lifetime of loyal service. The two words together are a perfect, bitter summary of the absurdity of the situation. It's an income derived from sin, a retirement plan for the fallen. Let's break down how this pension actually worked, because it was a surprisingly bureaucratic affair. It was the case of a shamed man quietly slipping a bag of coins to the woman H.E.D. wrong. The Kirk would never allow that. It was far too private, too open to abuse and interpretation. The Kirk controlled the entire process. Once the father was identified and had either confessed or been judged guilty by the session, he was ordered to pay a specific sum of money. This money was not paid to the woman directly. It was paid to the Kirk session's treasurer, who was usually one of the elders. This was a crucial detail. The Kirk acted as the financial intermediary, the trustee. This gave the entire transaction a veneer of official, righteous authority. It wasn't hush money, it was a legally enforced penalty. The amount varied. It depended on the wealth of the man and the customs of the parish. It might be a lump sum, intended to cover the immediate costs of childbirth and the first few years of the child's life. More often, especially if the man was not a wealthy laird but a tenant farmer or a craftsman, it was a smaller amount paid quarterly or annually. This is where the pension idea really takes hold. It became a regular, ongoing payment stream. The Kirk session would then dispense the money to the mother for the aliment or upbringing of the child. She would have to appear before the elders regularly to collect her allowance. This served two purposes. First, it allowed the Kirk to ensure the money was being spent appropriately, at least in theory. Second, and more importantly, it kept the woman in a position of perpetual dependency and humility. She was not a free agent receiving a settlement, she was a penitent sinner receiving charity. Her livelihood subject to the continued approval of the church elders. Historians have meticulously combed through Kirk session records from this period, and they are a goldmine of information. These records, often kept in dry, spittery script, list the names, the sins, and the penalties. You can see the system in action. To William Stewart, for his relapse into sin with Janet Bate, a fine of £10 Scots and he to provide for the child. Agnes Spence and her bairn child to receive 2 shillings per week from the funds provided by Thomas Mainland. It's a ledger of human frailty and institutional response. One of the strangest and most debated aspects of this system is what it incentivized. The Kirk's stated goal was to eradicate sin. They wanted to create a community of saints, but look at the system they created, by providing a financial safety net, however threadbare, and by targeting only the men with money. Were they not, in a bizarre and unintentional way, encouraging the very behavior they sought to condemn? This is a classic example of what economists call a perverse incentive. The policy had an effect that was opposite to its original intention. A poor woman, faced with the choice between starvation and sin, might look at the fornication pension and see it not as a punishment, but as the only viable economic option on the table. The Turk, in its righteous zeal to punish the wealthy sinner, had inadvertently created a cottage industry of shame. Of course, no one at the time would have ever admitted this. To suggest such a thing would have been blasphemous. The official narrative was one of sin and repentance, but the unofficial reality, the one lived by women like you, was one of grim economic choices. There's a small, curious detail that sometimes appears in the records that speaks volumes. Occasionally, a man accused by a pregnant woman would flee to perish entirely. She'd disappear, heading for a big city like Aberdeen or sailing off on a ship, leaving the woman and the Kirk session high and dry. In these cases, the Kirk would sometimes use its own funds to hire a procurator or a lawyer to try and track the man down and sue him in a higher court. This shows how seriously they took the financial aspect. It wasn't just about morality, it was about liability. The Kirk was not going to be left holding the bill if it could possibly avoid it. Use it by the fire, mending one of your father's wool stockings, the rough yarn scratching against your fingers. You think about the term pension. A pension is for the future. It's about security. It implies a long-term plan, and the idea solidifies in your mind. This isn't just about getting through the next winter. This is about mapping out a life. A hard life, a shamed life, but a life where you hold the purse strings, however small the purse. You look at your mother, dozing by the fire, her face exhausted and lined with worry. You see her complete dependence on your father, on the success of his fishing, on the whims of the laird. It is a life of constant, grinding anxiety. And you think of the fornication pension. It is a path through hell, where you start to wonder, with a cold knot of fear and determination in your stomach, if it might be the only path that leads somewhere else, somewhere you are not entirely powerless. The knowledge of the fornication pension doesn't bring you peace, it brings you turmoil. It's a seed that has sprouted in the dark soil of your mind, and its roots are cracking the foundations of everything you've been taught to believe. Your life is now split into two. There is the outer you, who goes about the daily chores hauling water, mending clothes, smiling wanly at your mother. And there is the inner you, who is locked in a constant, silent, and ferocious debate. You take to walking the shoreline alone whenever you can steal a moment. The rhythmic crash and retreat of the waves is the only sound that can quiet the argument in your head. You stand on the black, wet stones, the salty spray cold on your face, and you let the two voices fight it out. On one side is the voice of shame. It's a voice made up of 1,000 familiar sounds: your father's disappointed sigh, your mother's weeping, the minister's thunderous voice from the pulpit, the venomous whispers of the village women. This voice paints a vivid, excruciating picture of the consequences. It shows you your own face, pale with terror, as you are led to the stool of repentance. It makes you feel the rough, itching texture of the sackcloth against your skin, the chilling draft of the church, the weight of hundreds of eyes on you. This voice reminds you of a core, brutal truth of your world. For a woman, character is everything. It is your only currency, a good reputation, a name unstained by scandal, is the only thing that makes you eligible for a respectable marriage, the only path to a normal life. To lose it, to willfully throw it away, is to commit a kind of social suicide. You would become a ghost in your own community, a walking cautionary tale for other girls. The voice of shame tells you that no amount of money could ever buy back your good name. The stain is permanent. Then, there is the other voice. The voice of survival. It is quieter, colder, and far more pragmatic. It doesn't shout, it calculates. It doesn't speak of honor or guidelines, it speaks of hunger. It reminds you of the gnawing ache in your belly in the morning. It reminds you of the bitter cold of winter, of huddling for warmth while the wind shrieks outside. It points to your parents, growing older and more tired each year, and asks how long you can be a burden on them. This voice paints a different picture. It shows you a small cottage, just a single room, but it is yours. It shows you a fire in your own hearth, a pot of porridge bubbling over it, a pot you bought with your own money. It lets you feel the imaginary weight of a few coins in a cloth purse, a feeling of security so profound it's almost dizzying. It speaks of a future for your child, one where their belly is always full, even if their name is tainted by their mother's sin. The voice of survival argues that honor is a luxury for those who have bread, for those who do not. It is just a word. It is a choice between two kinds of death, a social death and a physical one. And you stand on the shore, torn between them. Historians clash on this very point. Do we view a woman who makes this choice as a tragic victim of an oppressive system, upon with no real power, or do we see her as a rational, if desperate, actor, using the only tool available to her to fight for her existence? Was this the ultimate act of exploitation, or was it a grim, courageous act of agency? The truth is, it was likely both at the same time. As you stand there, a strange, chilling detail you overheard comes back to you. The women discussing Elspeth's penance weren't just talking about her presence on the stool. They were critiquing her performance. One woman noted, with a certain cold approval, that Elspeth's stares seemed sincere. This is a horrifying realization. It's not enough to endure the shame. You have to perform it correctly. Your penitence must be convincing. Your sobs, your bowed head, your whispered confession, it's all part of a theatrical ritual. And your audience is the very community that is condemning you. Even in your moment of deepest degradation, you would have to be an actress. This detail, for some reason, is what begins to tip the scales. The idea is so perversely cynical, so transcational, that it strips the ritual of its moral power over you. If the shame is a performance, then it is no longer an authentic expression of your soul's ruin. It is a role you play. It is a price you pay, a task to be completed. You look out at the grey, indifferent sea. The waves keep crashing, the gulls keep crying. The world does not care about your honor or your shame. It only cares about who lives and who dies, who eats and who starves. The voice of shame is still there, but it's weaker now. The voice of survival, cold and steady, is getting stronger. You have not made a final decision. Not yet. But the internal debate is drawing to a close. The question is no longer can I do this, it is slowly, terrifyingly, becoming how do I do this. You turn your back to the sea and begin the walk home. Your steps feel heavier, more deliberate. The wind is still cold, but you barely feel it. A different kind of ice is forming in your veins. The world no longer looks the same to you. Before, people were just people. The taxman was the taxman. The minister was the minister. A farmhand was a farmhand. You saw them through the lens of your station as figures of authority, as neighbors, as objects of gossip. Now, you see them differently. You have become an assessor, a hunter. Every man you see is a potential variable in a life or death equation. Your daily routines have become reconnaissance missions. The walk to the well, the Sunday service, a trip to the tiny market, they are all opportunities for observation. This is not a search for love, or even for affection. It is a cold, pragmatic process, like a farmer evaluating livestock. You have a mental checklist, a set of grim criteria that a candidate must meet. It is a desperate and degrading form of window shopping. First, and most obviously, you must have money. This is the absolute, non-negotiable foundation of the entire plan. You start to notice the subtle and not so subtle signifiers of wealth. It's in the cut of a man's coat, the fineness of his linen shirt, the shine on his leather boots. It's in the confident way he carries himself, a posture that comes from a life without constant hunger. You dismiss the young farmhands immediately. They are as poor as you are. An entanglement with one of them would lead only to the fate of Jean, a forced marriage into deeper poverty. They are not targets, they are cautionary tales. Second, he must have standing in the community. He must have a reputation to protect. This is the lever you will pull. A wealthy but disreputable rogue, a man already known for brawling and drunkenness, is a poor candidate. Shame has no purchase on the shameless. You need a man who is respected, or at least, a man who wants to be, a man who attends church regularly, who sits on parish committees, whose family name carries weight. The fear of public disgrace is your only weapon, so he must be vulnerable to it. Third, he must be accessible. The laird himself is a fantasy. He lives far away and is surrounded by a fortress of social and physical distance. You need someone within reach, someone you might plausibly encounter, someone whose daily routines you can learn. The path to the mill, the road to the market, the shoreline where he inspects his fishing boats. Proximity is key. This narrows the field considerably. Finally, and this is a crucial strategic point, he should ideally be unmarried. Accusing a married man is a far more dangerous proposition. It elevates the sin from fornication to adultery, a crime the Kirk takes even more seriously. It would bring the fury not just of the man, but of his wife and her family. A wife is a powerful and unpredictable enemy. A bachelor or a widower is a much cleaner, simpler target. One of your most important intelligence-gathering opportunities is the Sunday service. And not just for observing who is there. It's for listening to the proclamations of the bands. This is a fascinating piece of social machinery. Before a couple could marry, their intention to do so had to be publicly announced in the church for 3 consecutive Sundays. This was to give anyone in the community an opportunity to come forward and state or offer reason why the marriage should not proceed. For example, if one of them was already promised to someone else. For you, the banns are a public bulletin. Every name read out is a name you can cross off your list. With these criteria in mind, the potential candidates in your small world come into sharp focus. There is the taxman's eldest son. He is the obvious choice. The one Elspeth named. He is young, arrogant, and has a well-to-do father who would pay dearly to avoid a prolonged family scandal. He is also reckless, often seen riding too fast along the parish roads. His arrogance makes him a target, but also makes him dangerous and unpredictable. Then there is the merchant in the nearby village, a widower in his 40s. He is not as wealthy as the taxman, but he is comfortable. He owns his own house and has a small business selling salt, iron, and timber to the crofters. He is a sober, respected figure, an elder in the kirk. His reputation is immaculate, which makes it a powerful lever, but his caution and piety would also make him difficult to approach. He is a high reward, but very high risk, target. You even briefly, mildly, consider the minister himself. He is unmarried, respected, and the kirk session, his own institution, would be desperate to hush up a scandal involving him, but you dismiss the thought as soon as it appears. It is too audacious. To accuse the man of God would be to invite a level of wrath and condemnation that you cannot even fathom. Some lines cannot be crossed. Historians often debate the power dynamics in these encounters. Was the woman always a passive victim of a predatory man, or were women sometimes the active initiators? Using seduction as a tool to engineer a desired outcome, some court records contain testimony from men who claimed they were enticed or lead on. Of course, such claims are self-serving, an attempt to shift blame. but it raises a complex and unanswerable question about consent and agency. From your perspective, as you plot, the line between being a victim and being a predator has become terrifyingly thin. You are planning to put yourself in harm's way, to make yourself vulnerable, in the hope of springing a trap later. Weeks pass. You watch. You listen. You weigh the options. And then, one day, you see him. He's walking alone, inspecting a stone wall at the edge of his property. He pauses, looking out at the sea, and for a moment, he seems lost in thought. Your heart starts to pound. A slow, heavy drumbeat in your chest. The decision crystallizes. It's him. You don't know how, and you don't know when, but you know who. The abstract plan now has a face. The hunt has begun. The decision, once made, settles inside you like a cold, smooth stone. It doesn't dissolve you, simply learn to carry its weight. The fear is still there, a constant no-hum beneath the surface of your thoughts, but it has changed its nature. It's no longer a paralyzing fog, it's a sharpening tool. It hones your senses, makes the world appear in stark, vivid detail. You are no longer just a girl going about her chores. You are an actor waiting for your cue, an architect reviewing her blueprints, an investor about to sink her entire fortune into a single, high-risk venture. The opportunity, when it comes, is not dramatic. It arrives on the back of a brisk autumn wind, in the form of a market day. A few times a year, a market is held in the main village, a rare occasion that draws people from all the surrounding croft. It's a chance to sell a few eggs, a knitted shawl, or a surplus of dried fish, and to buy precious commodities like salt, a new needle, or a bit of ribbon. For you, it is a hunting ground. You walk to the market with your mother, a basket of eggs on your arm. The village is more crowded and noisy than you've ever seen it. It's a swirl of sound and smell, the lowing of cattle, the sharp tang of the sea from the fishermen's stalls, the earthy scent of potatoes, the murmur of 100 conversations in the thick, lilting Orcadian dialect. It is a rare crack in the rigid social armor of the parish. People are less guarded, more animated. Curse lines, for a few hours, seem just a little more blurred. And you see him, your chosen target, the merchant, HES, standing by his own store, overseeing the sale of timber planks. He looks precisely as you have observed him from afar, sober, confident, a man at ease with his own authority. HES haggling with the farmer, and you watch, studying him. You note the way he gestures with his hands, the way he smiles a thin, controlled smile when he closes the deal. You are committing every detail to memory. This is not a man to be trifled with. Your performance must be flawless. You wait. You drift through the market, pretending to look at wares. But your attention is a thread tied directly to him. You need a moment when he is alone, when he is not occupied with business, and no poses. Your nerves are frayed raw. The stone in your gut feels heavy enough to pull you through the earth. Then, the moment comes. He finishes a sale, and his assistant takes over. He stretches, looks around, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. For a fraction of a second, your eyes meet. Now, you do what you have practiced in your mind 100 times. You look away quickly, a blush rising to your cheeks, a blush that is half performance, half genuine terror. You make yourself seem small, shy, overwhelmed by the crowd. You drift closer to his stall, pretending to examine a coil of rope. You are a fly moving deliberately closer to the spider's web. He notices you. Of course, he does. The young, unaccompanied woman lingering near his stall is an anomaly. Can I help you? Lars's voice is deep, not unkind, but tinged with the easy condescension of his class. You look up, feigning surprise. You stammer a question about the price of something. Anything. The words feel like ash in your mouth. He answers, and you hold his gaze for just a moment longer than is proper. Then look down at your shoes. It is a tiny, almost imperceptible signal, but in the strictly coded world of 18th century social interaction, it is as loud as a shout. It works. He is intrigued. He asks your name, where you are from. You answer in a soft voice. You are playing the part of the naive, innocent country girl, impressed and a little starstruck by a man of his stature. Every shy glance is a calculation. Every hesitant word is bait. This is the dangerous, ambiguous territory that historians find so fascinating. Was this a conversation, or the beginning of a negotiation when a powerful man engaged a poor woman in this way? What were the unspoken assumptions on both sides? The line between courtship, seduction, and exploitation is so thin as to be invisible. It's a matter of interpretation, and the interpretation often depended on who held the power. He suggests a walk, away from the noise of the market, to get a bit of air. This is it. This is the critical moment. The door you have been pushing against has just swung open. Everything in you screams to run, to get back to your mother, back to the safety of your anonymous, hungry life. But the voice of survival, cold and clear, tells you to walk through it. You agree, with a shy nod. He leads you away from the bustling market, down a path that winds towards the shore. The noise fades, replaced by the cry of the gulls. The sun is beginning to set, casting long shadows. He talks. You listen. He speaks of his business, of a recent trip to Kirkwall. You are a rapt audience. And then, in a sheltered cove, hidden from the past by a rocky outcrop, he stops. The encounter itself is a blur. It is a transaction of flesh, utterly devoid of warmth or tenderness. You detach your mind from your body. You focus on a distant rock, on the pattern of the lichen growing on it. You are not here. This is not happening to you. It is happening to a character you are playing, in a grim story you have written for yourself. It is a job, a piece of work that must be done. A fascinating and tragic aspect of this era was the concept of the promise of marriage. Among the poorer classes, a couple that had promised to marry was sometimes considered hand-fasted, and intimacy might follow. The public scandal arose only when the promise was broken. You know this, so as he fumbles with his coat, you cling to an evade, half-muttered word about the future. We should talk again, he says. It is not a promise of marriage, not even close, but it is something. You store the words away. They are not words of comfort, they are your receipt. He has finished quickly. He straightens his clothes, suddenly businesslike again, avoiding your eyes. He seems anxious to be gone. He presses a single coin into your hand, a pathetic, insulting gesture, and tells you to be a good girl. Then he turns and walks away, leaving you alone in the growing twilight. You don't move for a long time. The coin is cold in your palm. The only sound is the sea. The investment has been made. The premium, your body, your peace of mind. Your last shred of innocence has been paid in full. Now begins the long, agonizing wait to see if it will yield any return. You don't go straight back to the market. You can't. Your face feels like a mask that might crack. You walk down to the water's edge and scrub your hands in the freezing, salty sea, as if you could wash away the feeling of his touch, the memory of the last hour. The single coin he gave you feels heavy and poisonous in your pocket. You have an insane urge to throw it as far as you can into the churning grey water, but you don't. You clench your fist around it. It is the first piece of evidence. The walk home is a silent, internal scream. Every step feels both heavy and unreal. You find your mother, who scolds you gently for wandering off. You murmur an excuse about feeling unwell, and she accepts it, her mind on the price of wool. You are an island of secrets in the small sea of your family. You have never felt more alone. The encounter replays in your mind, over and over, but you don't allow yourself to dwell on the physical act. You force yourself to analyze it like a general reviewing a battle. You focus on the words, the transaction. He asked your name. You told him. He knows who you are. He said, "We should talk again." It was a lie, a casual dismissal. But he said it, in the desperate court of your own mind. You twist it into a flimsy, implied promise. He gave you a coin, a tangible link. This is what it felt like to be on the other side of the whispers. You are now the keeper of a dangerous secret. It's a secret that has a life of its own, a ticking clock attached to it. Every glance from a neighbor, every question from your mother, feels like an accusation. You become paranoid, convinced that your guilt is written all over your face. The encounter was a silent negotiation, a dark and unspoken agreement understood differently by both parties. From his perspective, it was a simple, sordid transaction, a moment of opportunism with a poor, perhaps naive, country girl. He likely assumed his small payment and his superior social status were enough to ensure your silence. He saw you as disposable. He underestimated you. He saw a victim, not an investor. From your perspective, it was the signing of a contract written in the invisible ink of shame and desperation. You gave him what he wanted, a few moments of power and pleasure. In return, he gave you what you needed, a biological and circumstantial link. You now hold a claim on him, a claim that he doesn't even know exists yet. Historians studying court records from this period often note the different narratives presented by men and women. Men would often describe such encounters as transactional, sometimes even claiming the woman was a willing, even eager, participant. Women, on the other hand, would frame the encounter in the language of courtship and betrayal. They would speak of promises, of being overcome by affection or persuasion. This wasn't necessarily a lie. It was a necessary reframing. To have any hope of being seen as a wronged party rather than a wanton sinner by the Kirk session, a woman had to present a story of seduction and broken promises. She had to be a victim of a man's deceit, not a willing partner in sin. You are already beginning to construct this narrative in your mind, polishing the flimsy half-truths until they shine. A peculiar but relevant piece of old Scottish law was the concept of habit and repute. A man and woman who lived together and were generally considered by their community to be married could, in some cases, be legally declared married, even without a formal ceremony. This speaks to the power of public perception in defining reality. Your plan is a dark mirror of this concept. You are not trying to establish a marriage, but a connection, by linking his name to yours, first in your own mind, and eventually in the public square. You are trying to create a bond of habit and repute that is not matrimonial, but financial. In the days that follow, you live in a state of heightened alert. You avoid the village, sticking to the familiar paths around your family escroft. You throw yourself into your work with a frantic energy, trying to exhaust your body so your mind will not have time to think. But the thought is always there. You see the merchant once. A week later, he is riding on the main track, and you are in a nearby field, digging potatoes. You duck your head, your heart hammering against your ribs. He rides past without a glance in your direction. For him, you are already forgotten, a non-person. The thought should be devastating, but instead, a cold fury settles in your gut. He does not know it yet, but you are a debt that is about to come due. The silence of the transaction is over. His forgetting you is part of the plan. It will make his eventual, public remembering all the more shocking. Now, you enter the quietest and most agonizing phase of the plan, the waiting. Everything that was once within your control is now finished. You have chosen your target, engineered the encounter, and secured the fragile link. The rest is left to the slow, silent, and utterly indifferent workings of your own body. The world, which had seemed so sharp and full of terrible meaning, now becomes a blur of monotonous routine. Each day is a perfect copy of the one before it. You rise in the dark. You stoke the fire. You eat the porridge. You do the work. The rhythm of your life is the same, but you are profoundly changed within it. You are a spectator in your own life, waiting for a signal that will change everything. Time stretches and contorts. A single day can feel like a year, a week like a century. You are exquisitely attuned to every subtle shift in your body, every minor ache or twinge. You become a scholar of your own physiology, A flicker of nausea. A moment of dizziness. Is this it, or is it just a result of the poor food? The endless work. You live in a state of constant, nerve-shredding uncertainty. Your secret isolates you. You cannot share your anxiety with anyone. When your mother asks why you are so quiet, you blame a headache. When your sister teases you for being lost and full, you force a smile. You are a fortress, and the siege is taking place within your own walls. The silence is the hardest part. The waiting and the silence. This period of waiting highlights the immense biological gamble these women were taking. In the 18th century, the understanding of human reproduction was hazy at best, a mix of folklore, religious doctrine, and rudimentary medical theory. There was no simple, reliable pregnancy test. The only proof was the quickening the first time a woman feels the fetus move and the eventual, undeniable swelling of her belly. This meant a woman could be waiting for months, trapped in a limbo of hope and fear. You find yourself obsessed with the moon. You watch it wax and wane, a silent, celestial clock ticking off the days. The folk knowledge of your community, passed down from mother to daughter, is full of beliefs about the moon's influence on fertility and women's bodies. These are not scientific facts, but in a world without science, they are the only framework you have. You count the cycles of the moon with a growing sense of dread and a terrible, secret hope. Historians who study women's history from this period face a significant challenge: a lack of sources. The vast majority of women like you were illiterate. They did not keep diaries or write letters. Their inner lives, their hopes and fears during a period like this, are largely lost to us. We can only reconstruct their experiences through the cold, official language of Kirk-session records, or through the filter of male writers. This archival silence is a profound frustration for historians. What did a woman think and feel as she waited? We can only speculate, using what we know about the social and biological realities of her world. The waiting eats away at you. You start to have doubts. What if the encounter produced no result? What if your body fails to complete its part of the grim bargain, the entire investment, the risk, the shame? The violation would have been for nothing. You would be left with only the sordid memory and the cold coin in your pocket. You would be back where you started, only poorer in spirit. The thought of this failure is almost as terrifying as the thought of success. You also worry about the man, the merchant. What if he leaves the island? What if he gets sick and dies? What if he marries someone else before your secret comes to light? Your entire plan is balanced on the fragile thread of his continued presence and prosperity. His life, which you intended to disrupt, is now something you must secretly hope remains stable. It's a perverse and unsettling dependency. One fascinatingly strange belief from the period, documented in some folklore collections, was that a child's character could be influenced by the mother's thoughts during pregnancy. A mother who was anxious or angry might produce a fretful or ill-tempered child. Imagine the psychological burden of this belief. You are not only waiting for a biological sign, but you are also terrified that your own inner turmoil, your fear, your cold calculation, your fury might somehow be physically shaping the child inside you. You try to push down the ugly thoughts, to feign a calmness you do not feel, for the sake of a child that may or may not even exist. A month passes, then another. The seasons are turning. The brief, bright summer is a memory, and the long, great twilight of the Orcadian autumn is settling in. The days are getting shorter, the nights colder. Your hope begins to fade, replaced by a dull, aching resignation. Perhaps it was all for nothing. Perhaps you are destined to remain in this life of silent, hungry desperation forever. You almost begin to accept it. And then, one morning, you wake up, and something is different. A change so subtle you almost dismiss it, but it is there. A deep, internal shift, a signal from the darkness. The wait is over. It begins not as a thought, but as a revolt. A rebellion in the pit of your stomach. One morning, the familiar smell of the peat smoke and boiling porridge, a smell that has been the backdrop to your entire life, suddenly becomes unbearable. You rush outside, into the damp, cold air, and are sick in the cave yard. At first, you dismiss it. A piece of fish that wasn't quite right. A touch of illness from the changing seasons. But it happens again the next morning, and the next. This is not the sickness of bad food. You know what that feels like. This is different. It is a deep, internal churning. A physical rejection of the world that leaves you weak and trembling. It is a sickness with a purpose. The moon has cycled again, and your body has missed its customary rhythm. This is a more concrete sign, a silent alarm that only you can hear. You lie awake in the dark, surrounded by the soft breathing of your sleeping family, and you are utterly, terrifyingly alone with this new knowledge. The waiting is over. The gamble has paid off. The investment has matured, and a cold wave of triumph washes over you, so intense it feels like fear. It is the triumph of a survivor, not a victor. It's the grim satisfaction of a trap well laid and successfully sprung. You have done it. You have secured the single, most crucial element of your plan. But with that confirmation, a new and more immediate terror begins to bloom. The abstract threat of the future has just become a concrete, biological timetable. In your small wooden chest, beneath a pile of worn linen, you have a secret tool. It's not an object of value. It's a simple piece of ribbon you bought at the market months ago. After the encounter, you began a secret ritual. Every morning, before anyone else was awake, you would wrap it around your waist. In the beginning, it was a ritual of hope and anxiety. Now, it has become a ritual of measurement. And day by day, the ribbon tells a story you can no longer deny. The ends no longer meet as easily. Soon, they will not meet at all. The ribbon is your silent co-conspirator, the unforgiving proof. Historians debate the emotional state of a woman in your position at this very moment. Was the primary feeling one of relief that her desperate plan for survival had a chance of working, or was it one of overwhelming terror at the impending social doom she had knowingly brought upon herself? To frame it as a choice between the two is, of course, a simplification. It was not one or the other. It was a storm of both, raging simultaneously within the confines of a single human heart. It was the successful catastrophe. You have secured the key to your survival, but it is also the key to your own prison cell of shame. The knowledge changes how you relate to your own body. It is no longer yours alone. It has become a vessel for your plan, an incubator for your future. But it is also a traitor. It is a walking, breathing announcement of your sin, one that grows more obvious with each passing day. Your body has become a living calendar, ticking down the weeks until your secret is public knowledge. You find yourself instinctively placing a hand over your stomach, a gesture that is half protective, half an attempt to hide the evidence. This period was fraught with a unique kind of medical uncertainty. There were no doctors to consult, no tests to confirm the news. All a woman had was the wisdom of her own body and the folk knowledge of her community. There were countless old wives' tales and folk tests for pregnancy, many of which sound bizarre to us now. Some involved observing the color and properties of a woman's urine, a kind of folk uroscopy. A strange but documented belief was that if a woman urinated on a body seed and it sprouted, she was pregnant. These were desperate attempts to find certainty in a world that offered none. Your ribbon test is a far more reliable, if terrifying, measure. And then, one evening, as you sit quietly by the fire, you feel it. It's not a kick or a punch. It's a flicker, a flutter, as delicate and ephemeral as a moth's wing brushing against the inside of your skin. It's so faint you think you've imagined it. You hold your breath, perfectly still, waiting, and there it is again. A tiny, undeniable message from the life that is growing inside you. This is the quickening, the moment the child's movement is first felt. In the eyes of both law and religion at the time, this was a moment of profound significance. It was the point at which the fetus was considered to be truly alive, to have a soul. For you, it is the final, irrefutable confirmation. All the abstract calculations, the cold planning, the shame, and the fear suddenly coalesce into this one tiny, physical sensation. This is no longer just a plan or a strategy. It's real. A person. A life that is inextricably bound to yours. You lay your hand on your belly, and for the first time, the gesture is purely protective. The secret is no longer just yours. It is shared. And you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that it will not be a secret for much longer. The secret has a weight, a gravity, for weeks. It was something you carried internally, a dense, hidden star in the private universe of your own body. Now, its gravitational pull is starting to warp the world around you. You can no longer contain it. Your body, once your private accomplice, is now a public witness for the prosecution. The subtle architecture of your own form has begun to change in ways that loose clothing on strategic posture can no longer conceal. The ribbon you used as a secret measure is now useless, tucked away in your chest as a relic from a time when your secret was still your own. Your movements have become slower, more deliberate, a new and unfamiliar caution governing every step you take. And the community, that sensitive, all-seeing organism, has noticed. The whispers no longer follow you, they precede you. They are about a wave of speculation that ripples through the village before you even arrive. When you enter a room or approach a group at the well, the conversation doesn't just stop, it changes frequency, shifting from idle chatter to a weighted, meaningful silence. The glances are no longer questioning, they are knowing. The women of the parish look at you, then at your belly, and then they share a quick, almost imperceptible nod with one another. They are a jury that has reached a unanimous verdict. Your best friend becomes your apron. It is a flimsy shield of woven linen, but you use it constantly, holding a basket in front of you, folding your arms in a particular way, anything to break up the telltale curve of your silhouette. This was the common, desperate technique of the time. There were no such things as maternity clothes for women of your class. A woman simply let out the seams of her dresses, wore her husband's old waistcoat, and used aprons and shawls to try and hide the undeniable for as long as possible. It was a silent, daily battle against the truth, one that every woman knew she would eventually lose. The public scrutiny is a constant, low-grade torture. You feel as though you are walking around naked, your most private, vulnerable secret exposed for all to see and judge. The stares don't feel merely curious, they feel proprietorial. Your body is no longer your own business. It has become a matter of public interest, a scandal in the making, and the community is watching its development with a grim, proprietary fascination. Historians have long debated the reach of this social shaming. Was it directed solely at the fallen woman, or did the stain of your sin bleed onto your family in a society where family honor was paramount? A daughter's disgrace was often seen as a reflection of her parents' failure to control her or instill proper morals. You feel this unspoken judgment now. You notice the way your neighbors are slightly more reserved with your father, the way the women offer your mother a thin, pitying smile. Your personal, desperate act of survival has brought a cloud of shame over your entire household. The question historians argue over is whether this was a universal reaction, or if in some cases, the community's sympathy for the parents outweighed their condemnation of the daughter. From where you stand, sympathy feels like a very scarce commodity. The final, devastating blow to your secrecy comes not from a neighbor or a village gossip, but from within the four walls of your own home. It happens one evening. You are sitting by the fire, mending a tear in a linen shirt. Your mother is sitting opposite, her knitting needles clicking with a steady, familiar rhythm that has been the soundtrack to your entire life. You are tired. For a moment, you forget your guard. You forget your posture. You lean back, and the firelight catches your profile, casting your shadow, undeniable and clear, against the stone wall. The clicking of the needles stops. The silence that follows is the loudest sound you have ever heard. It is a silence filled with everything that has gone unsaid between you for months. You don't look up. You can't. You keep your eyes fixed on the needle in your hand, your heart hammering a frantic, painful rhythm against your ribs. She doesn't ask. She doesn't have to. She knows. As a woman who has borne children herself, she knows the signs better than anyone. She has seen the changes in you, felt the tension in the house. She was just waiting for a confirmation that she never wanted. You can feel her eyes on you, and in her gaze, you imagine a storm of emotions: grief, anger, fear for your future, and a profound, bone-deep disappointment. In the silence that stretches between you, the secret is finally spoken without a single word being uttered. The private phase of your ordeal is over. You wait for the shouting, for the tears, for the recriminations, but they don't come. Your mother simply lets out a long, slow breath, a sound of utter weariness. Then, after an eternity, a soft, rhythmic clicking of her needles begins again. Only this time, it sounds slower, heavier, defeated. The community knows, your family knows. The secret is out. The wild animal uncaged and now roaming the parish at will. The whispers have done their work. They have delivered their verdict. Now you are just waiting for the official sentence to be read. The silence in your house now has a new texture. It is no longer the soft, weary silence of unspoken grief between you and your mother. It has become a brittle, high-strung silence, humming with the terrified anticipation of a formal discovery. The knowledge is no longer just a family secret, it is public property. And you know, with the certainty of a condemned prisoner, that the institution will eventually come to claim its property. Every day is a vigil of dread. Every unexpected knock at the door, every shadow that falls across the window, sends a jolt of ice through your veins. You and your family exist in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the official blow to fall. Your father has become a ghost in his own home, his face a mask of grim, helpless anger. He speaks little, and when he does, his voice is rough. He avoids looking at you directly, not out of malice, but because in your changing form, he sees his own powerlessness. The public failure of his authority as head of the household. Then, one grey afternoon, it happens. There is a sharp rap on the door. It is not the familiar knock of a neighbor. It is firm, official. Your mother freezes, her hands still in a bowl of dough. Your father rises slowly from his chair. He straightens his shoulders, a small, futile gesture of defiance, and opens the door. Standing there is a man you know, but do not know well. He is the kirk officer, or the beadle. He is a functionary of the church, a man whose duties hover somewhere between a janitor, a gravedigger, and a low-ranking policeman of parish morals. He is the man who rings the bell on Sunday, who keeps order during the service, and who carries out the mundane business of the kirk session. He is not the minister or an elder, he is the machine's uniformed operator. He doesn't smile. His face is a study in practiced neutrality. He looks not at you, but at your father. I summons from the kirk session. He says, his voice flat. He holds out a small, folded piece of paper. Your father takes it. His hand, usually so steady from a lifetime of handling nets and tools, trembles slightly. He doesn't open it immediately. He just stands there, holding this small, potent object, a physical manifestation of all his fears. The beadle gives a short, formal nod and turns to leave. His job done. He is already on his way to deliver some other piece of minor church business. His mind long past the quiet devastation he has just delivered to your door. This is the moment the informal becomes formal. The power of the written word in a largely illiterate society cannot be overstated. I rumor his air. I whisper his breath. But a written document, with its spittery, official-looking script, is a thing of concrete and terrifying authority. It is proof that you have been seen, noted, and recorded in the ledgers of power. Historians who pore over these kirk session records often wonder about the exact trigger for official action. Did they act as soon as a woman's condition became obvious, or did they wait for a formal complaint? The system often operated on a principle known in church law, as from a clamor essay literally, a noisy rumor or public outcry. The theory was that if a scandal became so widely known and discussed that it was damaging the moral reputation of the parish, the kirk session had a duty to intervene, even without a specific accuser. The debate lies in where the line was drawn. Was the collective whisper of the community enough to set the wheels of justice in motion? Or did it require one of your neighbors to take the formal step of reporting you to an elder looking at your father's face? You suspect the former clamor was a deafening roar. Here's a peculiar detail: the beadle himself was often in a precarious position. He was a member of the community, but his job required him to act as its enforcer. Delivering a summons like this was a deeply uncomfortable task, turning him into a pariah in the eyes of the family being targeted. Consequently, many beadles adopted this very air of detached, bureaucratic indifference as a psychological shield. He wasn't your enemy, he was just the messenger. Your father finally unfolds the paper. He reads it, his lips moving silently. Then he looks up, and for the first time in weeks, he looks directly at you. His eyes are not filled with anger anymore. They are filled with a profound, hollow sadness. He holds the paper out to you. You take it. The rough paper is cool against your trembling fingers. It feels both flimsy and impossibly heavy. The message is simple. Your name, a date 1 week from today, and a command to appear before the kirk session to answer for the sin of fornication. This is it. The abstract horror has just been given a time and a place. Too long, agonizing wait is over. The next stage of your plan, the part that involves public testimony and confrontation, is about to begin. You fold the paper carefully and hold it in your hand. It is an invitation to your own destruction, and the only key you hold to your future. The time for hiding is over. The week leading up to your appearance before the kirk session is a waking nightmare. Sleep offers no escape, filled with dreams of faceless men pointing fingers and echoing whispers you can't quite understand. During the day, you go through the motions of your chores, but your mind is elsewhere. It's in the small, cold room behind the church where the session meets. You are rehearsing. You and your father have spoken once. It was not a long conversation. It was terse, practical, and stripped of all emotion. Who was it? He asked, his voice flat. You told him the name, the merchant. He was silent for a long time, absorbing the information, calculating the social mechanics just as you had. He looked at you. A flicker of something. Was it grudging respect for your audacity, or just sheer shock in his eyes? Stick to your story, he said finally. Do not waver. That was all. It was not forgiveness. It was not support. It was a strategic command from a man who saw his family's precarious honor on the line. The day arrives, as you knew it would. You dress in your plainest, darkest clothes. The goal is to look humble, penitent, and pitiable. It is a costume for the role you are about to play. Your mother presses a small, warm oat cake into your hand before you leave. She says nothing, but her eyes are red-rimmed. This small, maternal gesture, this offering of food for a journey you must take alone, is more eloquent than any words. Your father walks with you to the church. You walk side by side, but a vast distance separates you. You are a source of shame he must now manage. He does not lead you into the main sanctuary, but to a small, stout wooden door at the side of the building. This is the entrance to the vestry, the room where the minister prepares for the service, and where the session holds its meetings. He doesn't go in with you. He can't. This is your trial to face alone. He puts a hand on your shoulder. A brief, heavy gesture. Remember, he says, and then turns away, leaving you to face the music. You take a deep breath and push the door open. The room is small, cold, and severe. It smells of damp stone, old paper, and beeswax. A long, dark wooden table dominates the space. At the head of the table sits the minister, a severe figure in black, his face impassive. Seated along both sides of the table are the elders. You recognize them all. The blacksmith, the taxman, A few are the more prosperous farmers. They are the patriarchs of the parish, the pillars of the community. They are your neighbors, men you have seen your entire life. Today, they are your judges. There is no seat for you. You are left to stand at the foot of the table, isolated, the sole focus of a dozen pairs of unblinking eyes. The silence is thick and judgmental. The minister begins. His voice is not the booming sermon voice you hear from the pulpit. It is a low, inquisitorial tone, cold and precise. He states your name, and then he reads the charge that you are, by clear and undeniable evidence of your own body, with child, outside the bonds of holy matrimony. He looks at you, his eyes narrowed. Do you confess to the sin of fornication? This is the first test. Your voice, when it comes, is a hoarse whisper. I do. The confession is crucial. Denying the obvious would only mark you as defiant and unrepentant, hardening their stance against you. Admitting guilt is the first step in the ritual of submission. A few of the elders scribble notes with quill pens. Scratching sound is loud in the silent room. As per the laws of God and discord, the minister continues, his voice unwavering. A sin has two parties, the woman who was tempted and the man who tempted her. You must now do your duty before God in this session. Name the man who is partner to your sin. This is the moment. The entire plan, the entire future, hinges on these next few words. You take a breath, feign a sob for effect. The performance is everything, and you speak the name you have been rehearsing for months. It was Master Sinclair. You say, the merchant. A low murmur goes through the room. The elders exchange glances. You have not named a poor farmhand or a transient sailor. You have named one of their own class. A respected man, a man of property. You have just thrown a large stone into their calm, orderly pond. There is a fascinating historical debate about the nature of the evidence in these cases. In the absence of modern forensics, how did they prove paternity? The system rested almost entirely on the woman's testimony, backed by a solemn oath. The legal principle was that no woman, especially in the face of death, childbirth was incredibly dangerous, would lie about the father's identity on risky, eternal damnation. Her word, under oath, carried immense weight. However, it could be rebutted if the man was willing to take an even more solemn oath of purgation, swearing his innocence before God. It became a contest of oaths, a high-stakes battle of perceived piety and credibility. One of the elders, a farmer with a hard face, leans forward. Master Sinclair is a godly man, an elder in another parish. This is a grave accusation. Girl, do you stand by it? I do. Your voice a little stronger now. You look down at the floor, projecting an image of shame and misery. Well, inside, your mind is a cold, calculating machine. You have prepared for this. You recount the story you have polished in your mind the market day. His kind words, your naivete, the walk by the shore, his promises. You are careful not to sound too articulate, too clever. You are a simple, wronged girl, not a conniving strategist. The minister listens, his fingers steep lead in front of him. He is weighing your story, your demeanor, the political and social implications of your accusation. He is not just a man of God, he is a manager of the community. A scandal involving a prominent merchant is a difficult and messy business. The session will consider your testimony, he says finally, his voice flat and unreadable. Master Sinclair will be summoned to answer this charge. You are dismissed. You curtsy, a gesture of submission, and back out of the room, closing the door softly behind you. You stand in the cold air, your body trembling with adrenaline and relief. You have done it. You have fired the shot. Now, you can only wait for the echo. The news of your accusation spreads not like a fire, but like a slow, seeping stain. The kirk session is a closed room, but its members are not monks sworn to silence. They are men of the parish. They go home to their wives, and in the quiet of their own homes. And from there, The whispers multiply, throwing out into the community, more potent and scandalous than ever before. It's one thing to speculate about a poor girl's pregnancy. It is another thing entirely for that girl to point a finger at a man like Master Sinclair. You have escalated the game beyond a simple moral failing. You have turned it into a battle of class, reputation, and power. The parish is no longer just watching you, they are watching him. They are watching to see how a man of his standing handles an accusation from a woman of yours. A week passes in this new, tense atmosphere. You are in a strange kind of limbo. You have confessed your sin, but you have not yet been sentenced to your public penance. The Kirk session is waiting. They cannot punish you for the sin without first dealing with your accusation against the man you have named as your partner in it. Then, the inevitable happens. The session summons him. You are summoned to, not to be questioned again, but to be a witness, to be present for his response. Your father walks with you to the church once more, his face set like a stone mask. This time, the feeling is different. You are no longer a lone penitent. You are an accuser. This is the confrontation. You are made to stand in the same spot at the foot of the table, a position of humility and submission. The elders are assembled, their faces even grimmer than before. The air in the room is thick with a tension that feels electric. The door opens, and Master Sinclair enters. He doesn't enter like a man accused, he enters like a man insulted. He is dressed impeccably, his coat well brushed, his linen crisp. His face is flushed with indignation. He doesn't look at you, he directs all of his energy, all of his considerable presence, towards the minister and the elders, the men he considers his peers. He is offered a chair. This small gesture speaks volumes about the chasm between his status and yours. He sits, and the minister, in a calm, formal voice, outlines the charge that has been made against him, based on your testimony. Sinclair listens, his jaw tight. When the minister finishes, he erupts, not in a wild, uncontrolled way, that with a cold, controlled fury that is far more intimidating. It is a lie, he says, his voice cutting through the silence. A malicious, fantastical lie, conceived in the mind of a desperate, sullen woman. He turns his eyes on you for the first time, and they are filled with contempt. I have seen this girl in the village, as I have seen 100 others. She is nothing to me, he scoffed. A short, sharp, dismissive sound, to suggest that I would associate with such a person, let alone commit this sin with her, is an absurdity. It is an attack on my character, on my good name. He leans forward, speaking directly to the elders. Look at her. She is with child. That is plain to see. And she is poor. Is it not obvious what is happening here? She has trapped some poor fool of her own class. And now she sees an opportunity to extort money from a man of property. She has chosen me as her target. It is a desperate, wicked gamble. His denial is total. He doesn't just deny the act, he denies your very reality. He paints you as a villain, a lawyer, a calculating extortionist. It is a masterful performance of righteous indignation. And now, all eyes in the room turn back to you. They are waiting for your response, for you to break down, to confess the lie, to crumble under the force of his anger. This is the moment your father's words come back to you. Stick to your story. Do not waver. You hold your ground by appearing to have none. You do not shout back. You do not meet his fury with your own. You simply look at the minister, a single, convincing tear tracing a path down your cheek, and you whisper, he speaks falsely. It was him. Before God, it was him. You have just created a stalemate. A classic, he said. She said scenario. One that played out in Kirk session rooms across Scotland for centuries. This is where the debate among historians becomes so pointed. How did an all-male panel of elders, from the same social class as the accused man, adjudicate such a case? Were they capable of impartiality, or was their instinct always to protect their own, to believe the word of a propertied man over a poor, Fallen woman, the records show a mixed and complex reality. Sometimes, the evidence or the woman's conviction was so strong that the man was found liable. Other times, the woman's case was dismissed out of hand. There's a fascinating dangerous legal trap here as well. By accusing you of lying, Sinclair is essentially counter-suing you in the court of reputation. Bearing false witness was a serious sin, and if the session were to believe him, you could face punishment not just for fornication, but for slander. Your gamble could backfire, leaving you with double the shame and no financial support whatsoever. It was a high-wire act with no safety net. The minister looks from Sinclair's furious face to your trembling, seemingly broken fall. He is trapped. To rule against Sinclair without more proof would be to alienate a powerful member of the community. To rule against you would be to let a potential sinner off the hook and leave a child to become a burden on the parish. He does what men in his position have always done, he defers. The session has heard both testimonies. He announces, his voice heavy, we will take the matter under advisement. It is a non-decision, a postponement of the inevitable. Sinclair stands, gives a curt, angry nod, and sweeps out of the room. You are dismissed moments later. You walk out into the cold daylight, your mind reeling. The confrontation was even worse than you had imagined. His denial was absolute, his performance powerful. It is your word against his, the word of a ruined girl against the word of a respected merchant. And you have no idea which one the Kirk session will choose to believe. The Kirk session's non-decision hangs over the parish like a heavy, humid fog. It's a period of agonizing suspense. You have been officially branded a sinner, but your punishment is on hold. The merchant has been officially accused, but he has not been cleared. You are both trapped in a state of public, institutional limbo. But the Kirk cannot wait forever. The scandal is festering, and your body continues its inexorable countdown. A decision must be made. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the beadle appears at your door again. This time, the summons is not for a private meeting. It is a sentence. Your punishment is to begin. Starting this Sunday, you will be presented on the stool of repentance. Your public shaming will proceed, even as the matter of the father's identity remains officially unresolved. This might seem like a verdict against you, but you understand the grim logic. Your sin is undeniable. It is written on your body. It is, as of now, a matter of conflicting testimony. The Kirk will deal with the undeniable fact first. So, your sentence begins. That Sunday is the longest day of your life. You walk to the church, a prisoner on her way to the stocks. This time, you are not just a spectator to someone else's humiliation. You are the main attraction. As you enter, a hush falls over the congregation. Every eye is on you. You feel their gazes like physical blows. The elder leads you to the front. You are wearing the sackcloth, the coarse, itchy uniform of the penitent. The rough fabric scrapes against your skin. You are made to climb onto the small platform and take your place on the stool. It is hard and cold. You are elevated, exposed, a specimen on display for the entire community. You keep your head bowed, your eyes fixed on the dusty floorboards. You can feel the weight of their stares. You can hear the rustle of clothing, the soft coughs, the tiny sounds that are amplified in the vast, judgmental silence. The minister begins his sermon, and it is all about you. He doesn't use your name, but he doesn't need to. He speaks of the wickedness of the flesh, the deceitfulness of the human heart, the stain of impurity that can corrupt a soul. He speaks of the shame you have brought upon your family and the parish. His words are a torrent of condemnation, washing over you, wave after wave. It is a performance of moral outrage, and you are his primary prop. You must sit there for the entire service, a grueling hour or more. It is a masterclass in psychological torture. You cannot react. You cannot speak. You must simply absorb it all. You focus on your breathing. You count the floorboards. You retreat into a small, hard corner of your own mind, a place where the words cannot reach you, after the service. You are the last to leave. You must wait until every other person has filed out, their eyes lingering on you one last time as they pass. This is your life for the next 3 Sundays. Each week, the same ritual. The walk of shame, the sackcloth, the hard stool, the sermon of condemnation, the silent stares. The humiliation is so profound it becomes almost abstract, a role you inhabit rather than a feeling you experience. Historians have long discussed the purpose of these shaming rituals. Were they truly about spiritual repentance, or were they a form of community theater? A public morality play designed to reinforce social norms. The performance aspect was key. The sinner had to look ashamed. The minister had to sound righteously angry. The congregation had to appear sober and judgmental. Everyone had a role to play. The historical debate lies in how much the participants actually believed in their roles versus how much they were simply going through the socially required motions. A strange and little-known fact is that in some parishes, a person could actually pay a fine to avoid sitting on the stool. This was usually only an option for the very wealthy. It reveals the underlying class dynamics of the system. For the rich, shame could sometimes have a price tag. To the poor, like you, it had to be paid for in person, in the currency of public humiliation. You learn to endure it, but you also learn to use it. You are not just a passive victim on that stool. You are a silent, public statement. Every Sunday use it there. Your swelling belly a more potent testimony than any words you could speak. You are a living, breathing accusation against the man who put you there. The longer he remains unpunished, the more the Kirk's own authority begins to look weak and biased. Your public shame is now applying pressure not just to him, but to the entire system. You see him in the congregation, Master Sinclair. He is forced to sit there, week after week, listening to the sermons about the sin of fornication, while the whole parish knows you have accused him. He looks straight ahead, his face a mask of indifference. But you can see the tension in his jaw. This is his punishment too. A subtler but still potent form of public scrutiny. He is tied to you, whether he likes it or not. By the 3rd Sunday, a subtle shift has occurred. The stares of the congregation are no longer just filled with condemnation for you. There is a new element of impatience, of expectation. They are waiting for the other shoe to drop. Your penance is almost complete. No. They want to see what the Kirk will do about him. Your silent, miserable performance on the stool has successfully turned the spotlight. Your 3 weeks on the stool of repentance are over. You have paid your public price. The sackcloth has been put away, but the story is not finished. You have fulfilled your part of the grin, unwritten contract with the Kirk, but the other party, Master Sinclair, remains in a state of defiant denial. The community is watching. The elders are squirming. The stalemate must be broken. The Kirk session is now cornered. They are faced with a classic dilemma that plagued church courts for centuries: your sworn testimony against his sworn denial. In a world without DNA evidence, how can they possibly determine the truth? They turn to their ultimate weapon, the final appeal in a pre-scientific age, the oath of purgation. This is not a simple promise. It is the nuclear option of religious jurisprudence. It is a formal, solemn, and terrifying ritual. The accused man would be brought before the congregation, or before the elders with God as their witness. He would place his hand upon the Holy Bible and swear, in the most sacred and binding language possible, that he was innocent of the charge. He would be inviting eternal damnation upon his soul if he were lying. In a society where the fear of hell was a tangible, ever-present reality, this was no small thing. It was a high-stakes game of spiritual chicken. To lie under such an oath was to commit perjury against God himself, a sin so profound that it was believed to seal one's fate for eternity. The session summons Master Sinclair one last time. You are not present for this meeting, but you hear about it later, because nothing of this magnitude stays secret for long. They present him with the choice, the final ultimatum. He has 2 paths. Path 1, he can take the oath of purgation. He can stand before them, Bible in hand, and swear his innocence. If he does this, the case is closed. The court, by its own rules, must accept his word as truth. He would be cleared of all charges, his reputation restored, and you would be left with nothing. Your entire, desperate plan would collapse into dust. You would be seen not just as a sinner, but as a liar and a slanderer, and you would have no further claim on him or the court for support. Pastor Hickam refused to take the oath. This is the crucial part. Refusing the oath was legally interpreted as an admission of guilt. Why would an innocent man refuse to clear his name before God? The only logical reason was that he was guilty and was too afraid of damning his soul to lie under oath. If he refuses, he is automatically found liable. So the choice is laid before him: risk his soul, or open his purse. It is a contest between his fear of God and his love of money. Historians still debate how effective this system really was. Some argue that, in a deeply religious hour, it was a surprisingly functional truth-finding mechanism. The terror of eternal damnation was a powerful incentive for honesty. Others argue that it was deeply flawed, favoring the cynical and the impious. A man who did not truly fear God could lie with impunity, while a genuinely devout man who was innocent might still be terrified of the ritual itself, or consider it an insult to his honor to even have to perform it. The system's effectiveness depended entirely on the conscience of the accused. To add another layer of pressure, in earlier times in some remaining conservative parishes, an oath of purgation required compu agatus. These were oath helpers, typically friends or neighbors of good standing, who would swear alongside the accused, not that they knew him to be innocent, but that they believed him to be an honest man who was telling the truth. Imagine the social pressure of having to find neighbors willing to stake their own spiritual well-being on your word. While this practice was fading, the principle remained: a man's reputation was his only collateral. So the elders wait for Sinclair's decision, and the entire parish waits with them. For you, this is the most powerless you have been since this whole ordeal began. You have played all your cards. Your fate, and the future of your child, now rests entirely on the conscience of a man who despises you. The rumor of the ultimatum reaches you. You spend a day in a state of suspended animation, every fiber of your being screaming with tension. Will he call your bluff? Is his arrogance greater than his fear of God, or is his greed greater than his piety? Late in the day, the news arrives, not through an official summons, but through the ever-reliable channel of village gossip. A neighbor tells your mother, who tells your father, who then informs you with a single, close sentence: Master Sinclair has refused to take the oath. He has chosen his money over his soul, or rather, he has chosen not to risk his soul by telling a lie he cannot take back. He has not confessed. He has not admitted anything. He has simply, through his refusal, accepted the default judgment. The stalemate is broken. He has, in the eyes of the kirk and the community, conceded. You walk out of the vestry and into the grey afternoon light. You don't feel triumphant. You don't feel vindicated. You feel hollowed out. The battle is over, and you have won, but the victory tastes like ash in your mouth. The formal meeting was brief and administrative. The minister, his face a mask of weary resignation, informed you that Master Sinclair, having refused the oath of purgation, was now considered the father of your child for the purposes of maintenance. A sum has been fixed for £1 a year, to be paid in quarterly installments to the kirk treasurer, who will then dispense it to you for the child's upkeep. For £1, it is, to you, a fortune. It is more cash than your father sees in a year. It is enough to rent a small cottage, to buy a meal, to keep a fire burning. It is the prize you gambled everything for. It is survival. But as you walk the muddy track back towards your family's croft, you begin to understand the true cost of those for £1. The nature of the stares you receive has changed again. The overt condemnation of the past few weeks has softened, but it has been replaced by acceptance. Instead, you are now an object of something new, a potent mixture of pity, and a certain salacious curiosity. You are the girl who took on a rich merchant in one. You are a local legend, a cautionary tale, and a piece of scandalous gossip all rolled into one. You are no longer just a poor crofter's daughter. You are a marked woman, a solemn woman who, through some dark and mysterious cunning, managed to turn her fall into a source of income. You are an anomaly, a disruption to the natural order of things, and the community responds by drawing a new, invisible circle around you. You are no longer one of them. You are other. The other women at the well fall silent when you approach, not with the hostile silence of judgment, but with the awkward silence of not knowing what to say to you. The men avert their eyes, some out of a newfound respect for your perceived power, others out of a fear of being the next man you accuse. You have become formidable, but in doing so, you have become profoundly alone. This is the essence of your bitter victory. You have secured your economic future, but you have forfeited your social one. You will never be just a woman again. You will always be that woman. The possibility of a normal life, of a respectable marriage, of being accepted back into the simple, unquestioning fabric of the community, is gone forever. You have traded your place in the social world for a place in the economic one. When you get home, the atmosphere is one of profound relief mixed with lingering shame. Your father can hold his head up a little higher. You were not proven a liar. The family's honor, while deeply stained, was not utterly destroyed in the way it would have been if Sinclair had taken the oath and branded you a perjurer. But the relief is thin. Your mother looks at you, and you know she is thinking of the life you will now lead. A life on the margins, forever defined by this single, sordid chapter. Here lies a point of intense debate for social historians. What was the long-term reality for women who received these pensions? Did this small income provide them with a genuine degree of autonomy and independence, a rare thing for women of their class, or did it trap them in a permanent state of dependency and social ostracism, forever reliant on the Kirk's administration and forever marked by their sin? Was it a lifeline or just a longer chain? The records show that many of these women never married, living out their lives as spinsters, their primary identity being that of mother to an illegitimate child. A crucial and devastating detail of your victory concerns the child itself. In the eyes of the law, your child will be what was known as filius nullius, the child of no one. This was an old legal concept that meant an illegitimate child had no legal relationship to its father, and in many respects, no place in the formal family line. While the Kirk has forced him to provide financial support, it cannot force him to give your child his name, his inheritance, or any form of paternal recognition. You have secured food for your child, but you cannot give them a father or a legitimate place in the world. They will enter the world already at a disadvantage, known to all as the bed of sin. A few days later, you collect your first payment from the Kirk elder who serves as treasurer. He counts out the coins into your hand without meeting your eye. He's mal-equipped and professional. You hold the money in your palm. It is real. It is heavy. It is yours. It is the price of your reputation, the down payment on your child's life. It feels like the coldest, heaviest thing you have ever touched. The coins in your hand represent a new kind of life, a life you must now build from the wreckage of the old one. The first act of this new life is to leave your family's home. You cannot stay. Your presence is a constant, living reminder of the shame that has touched them. Staying would be a slow poison, infecting the household with bitterness and resentment. Leaving is a painful necessity, a final severing of your old identity. Your father helps you find a place. It's a small, one-room cottage on the very edge of the parish, a place that has been empty for years. It's barely more than a hovel, with a sagging thatched roof and a floor of packed earth. But when you stand in the doorway, it feels like a kingdom. It is yours. The rent, paid with the first of Sinclair money, gives you a right to this small patch of the world. The £4 a year, which seemed like a fortune, quickly reveals itself for what it is: a subsistence wage. You learn to be a meticulous accountant of survival. You budget for oatmeal, for salt, for peat to burn in your hearth. A portion is set aside for the rent. There is no room for luxuries, no room to error. It is the difference between hunger and getting by. But it is a narrow, precarious margin. Your new life is defined by solitude. The cottage is isolated, set apart from the main cluster of crofts, a physical manifestation of your social status. Your days are no longer filled with the familiar rhythms of a family home, the chatter of your siblings, the shared work with your mother. The silence is profound. At first, it is a relief, a respite from the judgment in your family's eyes. But soon, it becomes a heavy blanket, a constant companion. You still go to the well, to the market, but your interactions are brief and functional. You are treated with a strange, careful distance. You are no longer part of the community's inner circle, the network of gossip and mutual support. You are a customer, an outsider who lives among them. This forced independence has a surprising side effect. It makes you resourceful. You learn to mend your own roof, to tend your small coal yard with a fierce dedication, to haggle for every penny at the market. You are no longer just a daughter in the household, you are the head of your own. It is a terrifying and, in a strange way, empowering reality. Historians who study the economic lives of women in this period highlight this paradox. While the fornication pension was born of shame, it provided some women with a degree of economic autonomy they would never have achieved through marriage. A married woman's property and earnings legally belonged to her husband. She had no independent economic identity as a single woman with your own income. However meager, you occupy a strained, liminal space. You have more economic freedom than your married peers, but you have paid for it with your social standing. The delivery of the pension itself is a recurring ritual of humility. Every quarter, you must present yourself to the kirk treasurer. It is a reminder that the money is not truly yours. It is administered by the church, and you are its ward. The elder might ask questions about how you are managing, about the child's welfare. The questions are a performance of their duty, but they feel like an intrusion, a constant reassertion of their power over you and your life. A small, sad detail of this existence is the loneliness. You watch other girls your age walking together, laughing. You see them at church with their new husbands, their families. You see the easy, unthinking way they belong to the world, a belonging you have forfeited. There are no more dances for you, no more shared secrets with friends. Your only confidant is the silence of your own cottage. You spend the long evenings spinning wool, the rhythmic whir of the wheel filling the small room. You spin not just for yourself, but to earn a few extra pennies. You sell your yarn to the merchant, not Sinclair, but another one, in another village. Every extra coin you earn is a tiny brick in the wall of your independence, a small measure of security beyond the quarterly payments from the kirk. This cottage industry was a common survival strategy for women in your position. They would spin, knit, brew ale, or take in washing, anything to supplement their meager income and build a life on the margins. They formed a kind of shadow economy, often overlooked in the grand narratives of history, but essential for the survival of the most vulnerable. You live by the rhythm of the seasons and the quarterly payments. You are not starving. You have a roof over your head. You have survived, but as you sit by your fire, the wind howling outside your lonely cottage, you often wonder about the nature of your survival. You have escaped the prison of your family's poverty, but you have entered a new prison of solitude and shame. The walls are just farther apart. The child arrives not with the drama of a storm, but with the quiet inevitability of the tide. The birth is a lonely, terrifying affair. You are attended not by a gaggle of supportive female relatives, but by a single, older woman from the village, a midwife of sorts, whose help you have paid for with a few precious shillings. She is practical, efficient, and unsentimental. This is a job to her, not a celebration. In the dim light of your cottage, you bring a new life into the world. It is a boy. He is small, red-faced, and loud, and as you hold him for the first time, the last of the cold calculation that has driven you for a year finally melts away. The plan, The strategy, the investment, all of it dissolves into the simple, overwhelming reality of this tiny, helpless person in your arms. This is no longer about a pension or survival. This is your son. But the world outside your cottage has already defined him. He is a bairn of sin, a bye below, a child of shame. His very existence is a public monument to your transgression. As he grows, you become fiercely, almost savagely, protective of him. You are a lioness guarding a single cub against a world you know is hostile. His name is a quiet act of defiance. You do not give him his father's name, Sinclair. That would be an unthinkable audacity. But you also do not give him your own family's surname. To do so would be to further tie him to the shame you brought upon them. You give him your mother's maiden name. It is a subtle but significant choice. It gives him a lineage, a connection to a family line, but one step removed from the immediate conflict. It is a name that belongs to him, and him alone. Raising a child on your own is a struggle of grinding, relentless work. You carry him on your back as you work in the kill yard. You rock his cradle with your foot while you spin wool. Every moment of your day is divided between the demands of survival and the needs of your son. As he learns to walk and talk, you see the world through his innocent eyes, and it breaks your heart. He does not understand the averted glances of the villagers, the way other children are sometimes hushed and pulled away when he approaches. He only knows that his world consists of you, the cottage, the sea, and the sky. This is a point of significant historical debate. What was the lived experience of illegitimate children in this era? The legal and religious condemnation was clear. But how did this translate into daily life? Some historians argue that in small, rural communities, the practicalities of life often softened the harshest edges of official doctrine. A child was still a child. Neighbors might still show kindness. Others argue that the stigma was inescapable, creating a permanent underclass of people who were never fully accepted. The reality likely varied enormously from one parish to another, and from one family to another. You see both sides of this coin. Some of the older women in the village, who have seen it all, will occasionally stop and give your son a small oat cake or a kind word. They see not a symbol of sin, but a child. But you also see the cruelty. You hear the other children taunting him in their games, using words they have picked up from their parents. Sinclair's get. One of them shouts one day, a piece of playground venom that cuts you to the core. Your greatest fear is the curse. The child's religious education is your responsibility, and it will be scrutinized. You must take him to church. You sit in a pew at the back, trying to be invisible, but you are not. You are a living sermon. The minister sometimes uses the presence of illegitimate children in the congregation as a launching point for a lecture on morality, a cruel and public reminder of your status. One of the most poignant details from Kirk session records is the frequent mention of the poor school. Many parishes use church funds to provide a rudimentary education for the children of the poor, including illegitimate children. This was driven by a mix of genuine charity and a pragmatic desire to ensure these children could read the Bible and would not become a drain on society. The thought that your son might one day attend such a school, learning his letters in a room full of other disadvantaged children, is both a source of hope and a profound confirmation of his place in the world. Your relationship with him is one of intense, almost suffocating closeness. He is the sole focus of your love, the only person in the world you are not hiding from. But you know that your love is not enough. You cannot protect him from the whispers. You cannot give him the one thing he lacks: a name that is not stained with shame. A father who will claim him, a legitimate place in the social order. One evening, as you are tucking him into his small bed, he asks a question that you have been dreading for years. "None," he says, his voice small and sleepy. "Who is my father?" You look at his small, trusting face, and the truth of your victory becomes brutally clear. You have won your £4 a year. You have won this roof over your heads. You have won your survival. But you have no answer for your son. Years pass. The relentless rhythm of the seasons turns your son from a boy into a young man. Your own hair is now threaded with grey, and your face is a map of the hard life you have lived. The cottage, once a symbol of your exile, has become your fortress, a small, fiercely protected world. Your fornication pension still arrives every quarter, a constant, familiar feature of your life, like the wind and the tide. But the world outside your cottage has not stood still. The 18th century is bleeding into the 19th. The whispers from the south are growing louder, carried on the ships that called Kirkwall and Stromness. They speak of new ideas, of new ways of thinking and living. The world is changing, and even in this remote corner of the islands, the old ways are beginning to feel old. You notice it first in the church. The new minister, who replaced the old, fire and brimstone preacher of your youth, is a different kind of man. He is younger, educated in Edinburgh, and his sermons speak more of God's mercy than of his wrath. He still preaches against sin, but the old, fierce, theatrical outrage is gone, replaced by a more sober, intellectual disapproval. The stool of repentance, your old instrument of torture, now sits in a dusty corner of the vestry, unused. The public shaming rituals that defined your youth have quietly fallen out of fashion, now seen as a crude and embarrassing relic of a less enlightened time. You see the change in the attitudes of the people. The old, rigid, community-enforced morality is beginning to fray at the edges. People are becoming more concerned with worldly matters, the price of kelp, the news from the Napoleonic Wars, the opportunities for work in the growing cities to the south. The kirk is still central to life, but it no longer holds the same absolute, terrifying power over every aspect of daily existence. The system of fornication pensions itself is coming under strain. The lairds and merchants, influenced by the new economic theories of thinkers like Adam Smith, are beginning to view the old feudal obligations and kirk-managed social welfare systems as inefficient and outdated. They start to argue that a man's charity should be a private matter, not a legally enforced, publicly administered penalty. The very idea of the kirk acting as a financial collection agency for illegitimate children starts to seem absurd, a messy entanglement of the sacred and the profane. Historians trace the decline of this system to a confluence of factors. The rise of the Enlightenment brought a new emphasis on reason and a skepticism towards old superstitions and traditions. The Industrial Revolution created new economic realities and social mobility, breaking down the rigid, taste-based hierarchies of the old rural world, and legal reforms began to shift power away from church courts and towards secular, state-run institutions. The kirk's power to publicly shame and financially penalize its parishioners was slowly being eroded. You witness a case that shows you how much the world has changed. A young woman in the parish finds herself in the same trouble you did, all those years ago. But the process is different. There is no public shaming on the stool. The matter is handled quietly, almost privately, by the minister and the elders. The young man involved, the son of a taxman, is pressured into paying a lump sum, a compromise. They call it directly to the woman's family to avoid a scandal. The kirk is still involved, but as a mediator, not as a judge and enforcer. The system is becoming less about public penance and more about private settlement. There is a deep historical irony here. The very system that you used for your survival is crumbling because the society that created it is evolving. The old world, with its rigid rules and brutal, but predictable, consequences, is giving way to a new world that is, in some ways, more humane, but also more indifferent. A fascinating legal quirk that hastened the end of this system was the rise of lawyers. As men like Sinclair became more aware of their rights under secular law, they were less willing to submit to the judgment of a kirk session. They would hire lawyers from Kirkwall or even Edinburgh to challenge the session's jurisdiction. These legal battles were expensive and messy, and many kirk sessions, faced with the prospect of a protracted and costly court case, simply gave up on pursuing fathers for maintenance, leaving the women and children to fend for themselves or rely on the meager parish for relief. Your son, now a man, feels the changes too. He is strong and hardworking. A fisherman like his grandfather. The stigma of his birth has not disappeared, but it has faded. In a world with more opportunities, a man is judged more by the strength of his back and the quality of his work than by the circumstances of his birth. He finds a place for himself in the community, not as Sinclair's illegitimate son, but as a good fisherman. He even marries a girl from a neighboring island. A girl who cares more about the man he is than the name he doesn't have. One day, you are sitting outside your cottage, mending a net, watching your grandchildren play on the shore. You have lived to see the world that shamed you transform into a world that has, if not forgiven you, at least forgotten to condemn you. The system that was your prison and your lifeline has become a historical artifact, and you realize, with a sudden clarity, that you are one of its last living relics. You are old now. The years have softened the sharp edges of your memories, turning them from painful wounds into smooth, worn stones you can hold in your mind without flinching. You sit on a simple wooden bench outside your cottage, the same cottage you've lived in for a lifetime. Your son, a man with grey in his own beard now, has built you this bench. From here, you can see the sea. It is the same sea. It has not changed. The quarterly payments from the Kirks stopped long ago. Master Sinclair has been dead for decades. His name just a marking on a gravestone in the churchyard. The pension outlived him by a few years, paid from his estate. But eventually, the new minister and the new laird agreed to a final settlement with you. A small lump sum that you used to buy the cottage outright. You are not a tenant anymore. This small piece of the earth is yours. Sometimes, when the wind is just right and the light is a certain shade of pearly grey, you think back to the beginning. You remember the face of the girl you were. Her stomach hollow with hunger in her heart, a cold knot of fear and calculation. You remember the weight of the stairs in the church, the rough scratch of the sackcloth, the chilling contempt in St. Orkney eyes. You remember the terror, the shame, and the crushing loneliness. And you ask yourself the question that has been the silent companion of your entire life: was it worth it? There is no simple answer. You cannot untangle the threads of your life to see what might have been. What if you had done nothing? What if you had chosen honorable starvation? You look around you and see the ghosts of that other life everywhere. The great agricultural improvements swept through the islands in your middle years. Land was enclosed, crofts were consolidated, and families who had farmed the same patch of earth for generations were cleared off to make way for more profitable sheep grazing. Your own family, your brothers and their children, were among them. They scattered, some to the kelp shores, some to the factories in Glasgow, some to the vast, unknown lands of Canada. The world you were born into, the world of the crofter, was dismantled and swept away by the cold winds of progress. Your desperate, selfish little plan for survival played out against a much larger, more impersonal tragedy. If you had stayed, if you had married a poor farmhand, you would have been swept away with them. It's a strange and unsettling thought. Your sin, your shame, your carefully managed disgrace, was the anchor that kept you here while the rest of your world was washed out to sea. This is a truth that complicates any easy judgment of your actions. Historians still debate the legacy of women like you. Were you tragic victims, forced into impossible choices by a patriarchal and unforgiving society, or were you cunning survivors? Proto-feminists using the only weapon at your disposal, your own fertility, to carve out a space for yourselves in a world designed to crush you. The truth, you suspect, is that you were both. You are a victim who refused to be helpless, a survivor who had to sacrifice her own honor to do so. There's a curious postscript to the Kirk's role in all this. The money the session collected from fines, from endowments, from the maintenance payments of men like Sinclair was often invested. They didn't just store it in a box. In some parishes, the Kirk session became a kind of rural bank, loaning money at interest to farmers or investing in community projects like a new bridge or a small harbor. It's a final, bitter irony. The profits of sin, your sin, were used to build the very infrastructure of the new world that was making the old one. And the system of public shaming, obsolete, Your grandchildren run up to you, their faces bright with life, their laughter carried on the sea breeze. They pull you from your thoughts. They know you only as their grandmother, a quiet old woman who smells of peat smoke and salt, who tells them stories of sulkies and giants. They know nothing of the stool of repentance, of the merchant, of the desperate girl who made a terrible bargain. Your story, your shame, dies with you. You look at your son, a good and kind man, a father himself. You look at his children, who will grow up in a world where their name is their own, not a mark of their grandmother's sin. They are fed, they are safe, they have a future. Was it worth it? You still don't have the words to answer. You just pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and watch your grandchildren play. The sound of their laughter and the eternal rhythm of the waves is the only answer you will ever need. And so, our journey to Orkney comes to a close. The story of the girl who made a sinful investment fades, leaving only the soft echo of the sea behind. The image of the old woman on her bench. The grey sky. The green hills. Let them soften now, the edges blurring into the quiet darkness of your own room. The wind that whistles around her cottage becomes the gentle hum of the fan, or the sound of the house settling around you. The cold, hard stone of her world dissolves into the warmth and weight of your own blanket. Think of her story now not as history, but as a dream that you are slowly waking from. The details drift away like smoke, the scent of peat, the rough texture of wool, the weight of a single, cold coin in a pocket. They were vivid just a moment ago, but now they are becoming part of the gentle, abstract landscape of your own mind as it prepares for sleep. There are no more choices to be made, no more shame to endure, no more desperate plans to hatch. There is only the quiet of this moment. The story is over. Your own journey into rest has begun. Let the last echoes of the waves carry you now, a gentle, rhythmic sound pulling you deeper and deeper into your own quiet rest. There is nothing left to do but to breathe, in and out. The world can wait. Let go of the day. Let go of the story. Sleep now. The end of the article. Good night.